Chapter 491. Under Su Qingsong's guarded gaze, Zhang Yichen slightly curled up the corners of his mouth. There was a hint of playfulness in his eyes. Then he took a big step back. But he didn't leave in a hurry. Su Qingsong also knew that she was no match for him. Her body was pressed against the wall, and her hair was a bit messy. Zhang Yichen subconsciously raised his hand, wanting to fix her hair. But when he saw the guarded look on her face, he subtly withdrew his hand. He gave Su Qingsong a deep look, then turned around and left. Su Qingsong kept looking at the man, afraid that he would come back to his senses and try to hurt her. But now she could see it. The man probably knew that she didn't hear anything, and he was just trying to scare her. Fortunately, the man didn't really do anything to her, or she would have died. The cell phone rang again. Su Qingsong's breath was still a bit unstable when she picked it up. Qingsong? What's wrong? It was Shi Mengwan on the other end of the line. I'm fine. Su Qingsong shook her head. After making sure that the man wouldn't come back, she turned around and walked out. You sound a bit out of breath. Are you really okay? No, I just ran into a dog and was scared. Shi Mengwan didn't ask further. She actually wanted to talk to Su Qingsong about something. But when the call was connected, she didn't know what to say. Oh, you rarely call me when I'm at work. What's wrong? What's wrong? Qingsong, thinking of Zhan Haoze, Shi Mengwan was a bit confused. Nothing. I might want to come to Rong City to hang out with you. I want to ask if you welcome me. Of course you're welcome. Su Qingsong couldn't be happier. Okay, I'll see if I'm free in the next few days. I'll arrange the time. Okay. Su Qingsong didn't think much of it. You're free to work anyway. Call me when you're coming, and I'll pick you up then. Okay. Shi Mengwan said a few more words, but didn't tell Su Qingsong what was on her mind. Never mind, she'd talk about it when they met. Throwing the phone aside, Shi Mengwan only felt that her mood didn't improve because of the phone call. Instead, she felt even more confused. What had gotten into her head yesterday? Why did she end up with Zhan Haoze? He clearly refused to admit that he was her dear brother. He clearly had a fiancé. Shi Mengwan, Shi Mengwan, do you want to be a mistress? Since she couldn't think of anything, Shi Mengwan simply stopped thinking about it. The chances of encountering Zhan Haoze recently seemed to be a little high. That was not a good thing. She thought that she needed to go to Rong City to find Su Qingsong. First, she needed to avoid him, and second, she needed to calm down. Zhan Haoze's figure flashed across her mind. Shi Mengwan's heart wasn't just filled with the sweetness of those memories. There was even more bitterness. Her big brother would probably never come back. Su Qingsong looked at the Land Rover parked in front of her and blinked. He turned to look at the person in the driver's seat suspiciously. When she saw that it was Hua Jinyao, she reached out to open the car door. Didn't you drive this car this morning? Hua Jinyao wasn't a person who paid much attention to enjoyment. There were many cars in the garage, but she often saw him driving a Bentley or a Mercedes. There were also sports cars, but Hua Jinyao rarely drove them to the company. This Land Rover was obviously not Hua Jinyao's favorite type. Yes, uncle's. He went to work. I'll drive it back to the mansion for him. He'll come for dinner tonight, and I can drive the car back then. Uncle? Su Qingsong thought of the youngest son of the great-aunt, Hua Yangxiu, whom Hua Jinyao had mentioned when he introduced his family to her. You're not talking about that great-aunt's son, are you? Yes. He's back. He went to his company to look for him at noon, then left in a hurry after receiving a call. He left his car at his company. He asked him to drive it back to the old mansion for him. As he spoke, his eyes fell on Su Qingsong's hand. What is this? Su Qingsong was holding a bird cage in her hand, which was covered with a cloth. It was very quiet inside. Parrot. Hua Jinyao looked at her, then at the bird cage. Don't tell me that you're going to give this to Grandpa. Can't I? Su Qingsong looked at him with excitement. I walked in the department store all day today, but I didn't see anything to give to Grandpa. Later, I passed by the flower and bird market, and I thought it would be good to give him a parrot. This is the best one in the shop owner's shop. It can talk a lot. It's very smart. I've tried it, and it can talk to people. You see, you're often away from home. Isn't it good to give it to Grandpa? Hua Jinyao suddenly laughed. He reached out and rubbed Su Qingsang's hair. His eyes were full of love as he looked at her. Honey, you're so cute. Su Qingsang's hair was messed up by him. She glared at him and said, just tell me if Grandpa will like it. Yes, yes. He'll definitely like it. After Hua Jinyao said that, he laughed again. Su Qingsang had no idea why he was laughing. Hua Jinyao, stop laughing. If you don't think Grandpa will like it, I'll quit. This bird was not cheap. It cost her tens of thousands of yuan. Hua Jinyao stopped laughing. He reached out and put his arm around Su Qingsang's shoulder. He leaned over and kissed her on the lips. Honey, you're so cute. She didn't plan to have a child so early, so she bought a bird for old Master Hua? Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang had a feeling that he was laughing at her. Stop joking. Just tell me, does Grandpa not like it? I said he will definitely like it. Hua Jinyao stopped laughing. He really couldn't tell that Su Qingsang was so talented. Holding back his laughter, he cleared his throat and said, Honey, I suddenly realized that I'm really lucky. Su Qingsang looked at him suspiciously. She instinctively felt that he was being sarcastic. The car stopped at the Hua family's old house. Su Qingsang walked in with the birdcage. When she entered the door, she was a little nervous and couldn't help but look at Hua Jinyao again. Hua Jinyao put his arm around her shoulder and said, Don't worry. Grandpa will definitely like it. Su Qingsang was quite happy when she bought the parrot. But after Hua Jinyao's joke, she began to feel nervous. Old Master Hua was sitting on the sofa, reading the newspaper with his reading glasses on. Seeing them coming, he waved at them. Jinyao, Qingsang, you're here. He saw the birdcage covered with a cloth in Su Qingsang's hand at a glance. What is this? Grandpa. Su Qingsang was still holding the birdcage, looking at old Master Hua. Even if she felt that it was inappropriate, she had to give it to him. Grandpa, I saw this parrot when I passed by the flower and bird market today. As Su Qingsang spoke, she took off the cloth on the birdcage. There was a red-beaked, green-feathered parrot inside, which looked very small and beautiful. It can talk a lot. I think it's quite interesting. So I bought it. It's a gift for you. You can play with it if you're free. After Su Qingsang finished speaking, she found that old Master Hua was looking at her with a strange expression. She was nervous again. She couldn't help but look at Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao's lips were pressed into a straight line. It was obvious that he was trying not to laugh. Su Qingsang glared at him and turned to look at old Master Hua. Grandpa, this bird can really talk a lot. And it's all auspicious words. She picked up the bird food that the shop owner gave her and put some in the cage. Say something. The parrot was completely different from before in the shop. It turned its head and ignored Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang was depressed. She knocked on the bird cage. Hello. Say something. The bird didn't even turn its head and didn't look at Su Qingsang at all. After she finished speaking, she remembered that the parrot had a name. But what was the bird's name again? Jade, say something. Right. The bird's name was Jade. Su Qingsang thought for a while before she remembered. Jade, hello. Say something. However, no matter how she teased it, the parrot still didn't speak. Hua Jinyao and old Master Hua just watched Su Qingsang tease the parrot. Both grandfather and grandson had restrained smiles on their faces. It was really hard for them. It can really talk. Su Qingsang turned to look at Hua Jinyao. The expression on her face was half embarrassed and half embarrassed. Hua Jinyao couldn't bear to see her like that. He put his hand on Su Qingsang's shoulder and said, All right, Qingsang. If it can't talk, then it can't. It doesn't matter. How could it not matter? Su Qingsang was anxious. It can really talk. Okay. It can talk. Hua Jinyao didn't argue with Su Qingsang. He had a feeling that Su Qingsang had been tricked by the boss. Su Qingsang originally wanted to give old Master Hua a surprise. She didn't expect that the surprise would be gone, and it would become a joke. Qingsang, sit down. Old Master Hua also held back his laughter, not wanting to embarrass Su Qingsang too much. If it can't talk, then it can't. Let Uncle Chung take it down. Hang it on the eaves of the back garden. Su Qingsang looked at the arrogant parrot. She really didn't expect a bird to not give her face. Uncle Chung came in and saw the bird cage. For a moment, he didn't understand why there was a bird cage. Uncle Chung, Take this parrot to the back garden and find a place to hang it. Remember to feed it. Su Qingsang thought about the precautions that the boss said. Hua Jinyao saw that Su Qingsang was so careful, and was a little jealous. No need to feed it. It won't talk anyway. Such a stupid bird. Just starve it for a few days. How could it not starve for a few days to make his wife so embarrassed? Who knew that the parrot, which had been silent, finally spoke? You're stupid. You're stupid. Hua Jinyao, Old Master Hua, and the others were all stunned by the sudden voice. Su Qingsang also didn't expect that the bird would speak like this. The parrot didn't seem to be convinced and kept shouting, You're stupid. You're stupid. Su Qingsang didn't care that it was scolding her. She looked at Old Master Hua, as if she was asking for credit. Grandpa, look. Look. It really can talk. Ha 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 ha. Old Master Hua finally couldn't help but laugh. This granddaughter-in-law was really too interesting. Not only him, but Hua Jinyao also laughed. Su Qingsang blushed because of their laughter. She stood behind Hua Jinyao embarrassedly and didn't speak. What are you talking about? Why is it so lively? The sudden voice was a little familiar. Su Qingsang turned around and her eyes suddenly widened. Chapter 492. Old Master Hua was so happy about the gift that Su Qingsang had just given him. The smile on his face grew brighter when he saw who it was. Yichen is here? Come here. Uncle. Zhang Yichen walked up to Old Master Hua and said, Uncle, long time no see. You're still so energetic. I'm not as energetic as you. Old Master Hua looked Zhang Yichen up and down. He was in his 30s and had a steady aura about him. The muscles and tall figure, that he had trained in the army, were clearly different from ordinary people. You. The last time your mother came, you didn't come with her. They have their business to attend to. I won't join in the fun with them. As Zhang Yichen spoke, he saw the parrot and the person standing beside it. His expression froze for a moment, and his eyes swept over Su Qingsang's face. Hua Jinyao was standing next to Su Qingsang when she came in. He was taller than Su Qingsang, so he blocked most of her body. When he stood in front of Hua Jinyao, he could see clearly. Jinyao, this is. He already had an answer in his heart, but he couldn't help but ask again. Uncle, this is your niece's wife. Su Qingsang. Qingsang, this is the uncle I told you about. He was Zhang Yichen, the youngest son of her great-aunt. Don't be fooled by his young age. He's already a senior colonel. Hello, uncle. The smile on Su Qingsang's face was a little stiff. She had never thought that she would run into Zhang Yichen again at the Hua mansion, right after meeting him in the afternoon. What was even more unexpected was that he was Hua Jinyao's uncle. Thinking of what he had done to her in the afternoon, which had almost been flirting with her, Su Qingsang suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. Hello. After the initial shock, Zhang Yichen quickly composed himself and reached out his hand to Su Qingsang, as if he were seeing her for the first time. Hello. Both Old Master Hua and Hua Jinyao were there, so Su Qingsang had to shake his hand. His palms were larger than Hua Jinyao's, and his palms seemed to be rough. Su Qingsang only held it for less than a second, before quickly retracting her hand. Zhang Yichen glanced at her again because of her movement. I didn't come to Jinyao's wedding. I came in a hurry today. He didn't prepare a greeting gift. My apologies. Uncle is too polite. We're all family, so we don't mind these empty formalities. He was such a young man, but he had to call him uncle. In terms of seniority, he was superior to her. Su Qingsang felt a little uncomfortable thinking about what Hua Jinyao had done in the afternoon. But one thing was clear. The other party was a soldier, so he was probably on a mission in the afternoon that he couldn't let her know. Thinking of that, the unhappiness and fear in Su Qingsang's heart dissipated a lot. Yes, I'll make up for it next time. Zhang Yichen looked at Su Qingsang's eyes. From this angle, he could only see her slightly puckered lips. Thinking about the two of them being so close to each other in the afternoon, he felt his throat tighten. He looked at the parrot, and then at Old Master Hua. Uncle, you haven't told me what you were laughing about. Here. Well. Old Master Hua recalled the situation just now. A faint smile appeared on his wrinkled face. Qingsang is filial to me, and bought a parrot to keep me company. We're trying to make it talk. The parrot didn't know what was going on. After Zhang Yichen came in, it stopped talking again. However, old Master Hu didn't have time to talk to the parrot. He asked Uncle Cheng to take the parrot away, then waved at Zhang Yichen, signaling him to sit down next to him. He liked this nephew very much. Although Zhang Yichen had been in the army most of the time, he would come to see him whenever he was in Rong City. I heard from your mother that you've been promoted to senior colonel. I haven't congratulated you yet. There aren't many senior colonels as young as you. There aren't many, but it's not like there aren't any. Besides, they have to respect my father, so it's not a big deal. You don't need to be humble. No matter how much they respect your father, they still need you to make contributions. You can only be promoted if you make contributions. Zhang Yichen smiled and didn't refute. Su Qingsang looked at Zhang Yichen and thought of the 2 times he had acted bravely for a just cause. She also thought of the fact that he was a soldier, so the unhappiness in the afternoon was gone. At dinner, old Master Hu asked Zhang Yichen to sit next to him. Hua Jinyao sat down between Zhang Yichen and Su Qingsang. Hua Jinyao seemed to be close to Zhang Yichen. From time to time, Su Qingsang saw Hua Jinyao lean over to talk to Zhang Yichen. They talked about things that happened in the past. When Aunt Zhou brought the soup to the table, Hua Jinyao habitually filled a bowl and put it in front of Su Qingsang. This soup is very nourishing. Aunt Zhou made it especially for you. You should drink more. Lu Tongjia and Hua Mingguang were already numb to the fact that the 2 of them would show off their affection whenever they were having dinner. Lu Tongjia's mouth twitched a little. Why was this soup specially made for Su Qingsang? Aunt Zhou had made it because she hadn't been in good spirits these days. Lu Tongjia moved her lips. She wanted to say something, but she chose to stay silent when she saw Zhang Yichen. Hua Mingguang didn't say anything either. After all, they were both tired of seeing this scene. Zhang Yichen was the only one who had never seen it before. He sat next to Hua Jinyao and watched him fill Su Qingsang's bowl with soup and put food in her bowl. This was the Hua Jinyao he had never seen before. And this was the Su Qingsang he had never seen before. He remembered the cunning look on Su Qingsang's face when she faced the blackmailer's family in the hospital. He remembered the mischievous tone she used to ask him if he was being blackmailed again when he sent the family to the hospital. And this afternoon, she was clearly scared but tried to stay calm. She looked at him with a guarded expression. His heart beat faster uncontrollably. He lowered his head and focused on the food in front of him. He clearly knew that she was his niece-in-law, but in those few short meetings, he could not get her image out of his mind. Yichen, how long can you stay in Rong City this time? Old Master Hu's voice brought Zhang Yichen back to his senses. 3 days. Then stay at home. Old Master Hu had spoken. Zhang Yichen wanted to refuse, but he saw Su Qingsang put food in Hua Jinyao's bowl with her chopsticks. Surprisingly, he didn't object. Old Master Hu was very happy. He asked Uncle Cheng to clean up the room. Su Qingsang took a shower and found that Hua Jinyao hadn't returned to his room. She called Hua Jinyao and found that he didn't answer. She looked at the time, put on her coat and went downstairs. After asking Uncle Cheng, Su Qingsang finally found Hua Jinyao in the Hua family's gym. When Su Qingsang walked to the door, she heard sounds coming from inside. The Hua family's gym was very large. Half of it was filled with all kinds of fitness equipment. The other half was covered with thick mats. It looked like it was for yoga. Su Qingsang pushed the door open and saw Hua Jinyao and Zhang Yichen fighting in the open space that she thought was for yoga. It could be seen that the 2 of them were just exchanging pointers and not really fighting. Zhang Yichen was good at martial arts, and so was Hua Jinyao. The 2 of them fought back and forth for quite a while. However, Zhang Yichen suddenly started to attack Hua Jinyao with his halberd. He changed his style, and Hua Jinyao changed his style. Su Qingsang didn't know how to fight, but she could see that Zhang Yichen was better than Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao held on for a long time, but in the end, he was knocked to the ground. When his body was pressed to the ground by Zhang Yichen, he gasped and said, "Are you serious? I'm not good at martial arts." Zhang Yichen stood up and reached out a hand to Hua Jinyao to help him up. "You haven't been training lately, have you?" "Yes." Hua Jinyao didn't deny it. "I have a lot of things to do in the company. I can't be like you, training in the military camp every day. How can I be compared? He stood up, panted, and punched Zhang Yichen's chest. Damn you! How could you hit me so hard? It hurts like hell. He felt that Zhang Yichen wasn't fighting with all his strength like before. He was about to ask why. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Su Qingseng coming. He immediately became alert. Wife. He quickly walked up to Su Qingseng, grabbed her hand and said, You see, I've gone too far. It hurts like hell. Su Qingseng gave Zhang Yichen a discreet glance. Then she looked at Hua Jinyao with concern. Where are you hurt? Here, here, and here. Hua Jinyao didn't think it was embarrassing to act pitiful in front of his wife. He pointed at several places on his body. Su Qingseng was about to lift up Hua Jinyao's shirt to check, but she stopped when she saw Zhang Yichen walking over. Go back to the room. I'll help you apply some ointment. Okay. Hua Jinyao was satisfied to see Su Qingseng's concern. He didn't care that Zhang Yichen was still there. He leaned over and kissed Su Qingseng on the cheek. In the past, Hua Jinyao had shown affection in front of others, but Su Qingseng felt uncomfortable when Zhang Yichen saw it. Let's go. You don't want to apply the ointment, do you? Yes, of course. Hua Jinyao turned around and waved at Zhang Yichen. Uncle, let's fight again next time. Su Qingseng nodded at Zhang Yichen as a greeting, then left with Hua Jinyao. Zhang Yichen stood there motionlessly. A light fragrance floated in the air. It was Su Qingseng's scent. He saw that Su Qingseng had obviously just taken a shower. The ends of her hair were slightly wet, and there was a light fragrance of shower gel on her body. Even though she had left, the smell still lingered in the air. It gently surrounded him. Zhang Yichen stood there motionlessly. He had grown up in a military camp. Since he was a child, there were no other women around him except for his mother and sister. Those who went on missions with the army didn't count. Most of the women in the military camp were less feminine and more masculine. He didn't have much contact with women like Su Qingseng, but he didn't expect that they would become like this. Chapter 493. When Su Qingseng went upstairs, she found that Hua Jinyao's body was bruised. His abdominal muscles were very strong, but the skin under his clothes was extremely fair. Looking at it this way, the place where he was hit looked particularly frightening. Why is it so bruised? Looking at the more than one bruise, Su Qingseng looked distressed and dissatisfied. Uncle, aren't you being too reckless? He's a soldier, so his stamina must be better. How could he be so cruel? He knew that Hua Jinyao couldn't beat him, but he didn't go easy on him. It was too much. Honey, I'm fine. Hua Jinyao liked to see Su Qingseng worried about him. He didn't take much advantage of me. I'm telling you, he must be injured too. No matter how injured he is, he's not as bad as you. Su Qingseng looked at the 2 bruises on Hua Jinyao's stomach. She felt distressed. Go take a shower. I'll get the medicine. I'm fine. Hua Jinyao didn't care at all. It's just a minor injury. It'll disappear tomorrow. No. Su Qingseng felt the pain just by looking at it. Go take a shower. I'll ask Uncle Cheng to get the medicine. Hua Jinyao couldn't argue with Su Qingseng, so he went to take a shower. When he came out, Su Qingseng was already waiting by the bed with the medicine. After the shower, she found that the bruise on his waist looked even darker. The pain in Su Qingseng's eyes became more obvious. Why did you suddenly think of fighting with your uncle out of nowhere? I told you it's not a fight. It's a friendly match. Su Qingseng didn't want to argue with him. In her opinion, fighting and friendly matches were the same. The heater was on in the room. Hua Jinyao was bare-chested, letting Su Qingseng apply the medicine for him. Su Qingseng poured out the medicine. As soon as it touched Hua Jinyao, he cried out in pain. Ouch, ouch. You deserve it. Su Qingseng glared at him, but her hands were much lighter. I'll let you continue the friendly matches next time. You don't know. Yichen and I have always been like this. In front of old Master Hua and the elders, Hua Jinyao called Zhang Yichen uncle. They had a good relationship in private, so Hua Jinyao always called Zhang Yichen by his name. Hua Jinyao winked and asked Su Qingseng to apply the medicine. Su Qingseng rolled her eyes at him. I'm serious. Hua Jinyao thought of the time when he joined the army. Do you know? I had been in my great-aunt's army, with my uncle at the time. In terms of skill, I admit that I am inferior to him. For someone like Zhang Yichen, who trained every day, to rise from a common soldier to a senior colonel in just over a decade, that wasn't something an ordinary person could do. If he performs another meritorious deed, he'll be promoted again. So, honey, it's not that I can't beat him. It's because he's too powerful. The fate between people was also strange. Old Master Huo was not the only one who liked Zhang Yichen. His relationship with Hu Yifan and Wei Sihai was even better than with Hu Yifan and Wei Sihai. Yes. Su Qingseng couldn't help but increased the strength of her hand when she saw that he was still joking when he was injured. Seeing Hu Jinyao's facial features scrunched together, she seemed to be satisfied. I know you can do it. You don't have to explain. It wasn't like she hadn't seen videos of soldiers training in the army. Hu Jinyao, who stayed in the office every day, couldn't compare with someone who came from that kind of place. Honey, Hu Jinyao was afraid that Su Qingseng wouldn't believe him. I'm serious. Zhang Yichen is so powerful because he comes from a different family. If I were in the army, I'd be better than him. I wouldn't be beaten by him. Do you believe me? Yes. I'll believe whatever you say. It was obvious that she didn't believe him. How could Hu Jinyao let his wife think of him like that? After he finished applying the ointment, he put the ointment on her hand aside. He turned over and pressed Su Qingseng on the bed. You don't believe that I'm better than him? Hu Jinyao narrowed his star-like eyes full of danger. Stop it. I haven't washed my hands yet. He didn't mind the ointment on her hand. What are you washing? Just apply it on me later. Su Qingseng almost laughed at Hu Jinyao's words, but soon she couldn't laugh anymore. In the morning, Su Qingseng was a little listless. She wouldn't have gotten up if she hadn't had to work today. Hu Jinyao went to exercise early in the morning. Su Qingseng hurriedly put on her clothes and went downstairs. She was in a hurry if she didn't want to be late. When she walked to the corner of the stairs, Su Qingseng yawned. She didn't pay attention to her feet and accidentally stepped on something. She was startled. When she came back to her senses, she immediately tried to grab the handrail next to her. However, there was still some distance between her and the handrail. She was about to fall, but a pair of big hands caught her waist in time. They took her away from the edge of the stairs and put her in a bigger space around the corner. Su Qingseng steadied herself. She patted her chest with lingering fear. When she saw the muscular chest in front of her, she suddenly realized what was going on. Hu Jinyao was working out in the gym downstairs. Who was holding her now? Looking at Zhang Yichen's thick eyebrows and big eyes, she said uncomfortably, "Thank you. I'm standing." Zhang Yichen looked at Su Qingseng and slowly pulled his hand back. He was as tall as Hu Jinyao. Looking at Su Qingseng's pale face, he felt that he had pulled his hand back too quickly. Watch where you're going. Su Qingseng pressed her lips together. She was a little uncomfortable with Zhang Yichen's lecture. She had never made a mistake like this. What happened today was just an accident. She took a step back and wanted to continue walking downstairs. Zhang Yichen pulled her again. Be careful. The stairs were behind her. Did she want to fall again? Thank you. Su Qingseng lowered her head and thanked him. She took a step to the side to make sure that she was safe, and also to get rid of his hand. Zhang Yichen's hand was still on her waist. Now he let go of it. He subconsciously tightened his grip. His eyes never left Su Qingseng's face. Be careful. I know. Thank you. Su Qingseng didn't say anything to him. She turned around and went downstairs. This time, she lowered her head and stared at the stairs. Zhang Yichen also wanted to go downstairs, so he followed Su Qingseng. Su Qingseng wanted to walk faster, but she felt that it would be too deliberate. She might as well walk like this. She was so focused on the stairs that she didn't notice that Zhang Yichen was very tall, and that he was walking behind her. Because of this, he could easily see the marks on her neck from his angle. Even though he wasn't experienced, he could tell that it was a hickey. The marks on the back of her neck could only have been left by Hu Jinyao. Zhang Yichen's eyes darkened again because of this annoying thing. At the end of the stairs on the second floor, Lu Tongjia watched the scene. She clenched her fists so hard that they turned white. Zhang Yichen would stay in Rong City for 3 days. Therefore, he would stay at the Hu Mansion for those 3 days. Because of this, Hua Jingyao drove to pick Su Qingseng up every day and drove her for more than an hour back to the Hua mansion. The third day happened to be a Saturday. Su Qingseng didn't have to go to work. She woke up early in the morning and practiced Tai Chi with old Master Hua. After practicing for a while, she had become good at it. However, she didn't use much strength. Old Master Hua kept saying that she ate too little. She needed to eat more. "Grandpa, I'm a girl. Please don't say that I don't eat enough. Compared to other people, I eat a lot. You're still too thin. You need to be fatter." Old Master Hua was a little unhappy before, but after hearing his grandson's explanation, he didn't care about his anger anymore. He knew that Hua Jingyao didn't get along with his mother. Hua Jingyao didn't want to have children. However, Lu Tongjia blamed Su Qingseng for it. Old Master Hua was old. All he wanted was to keep the family together. He didn't want to worry about these small things anymore. Before Su Qingseng could say anything, she heard "Grandpa, Grandpa" from the eaves in the distance. It was the parrot from before. It didn't want to talk when it first arrived. In the past 2 days, no one had talked to it, so it kept talking. Old Master Hua laughed again. What a noisy bird. He didn't expect Su Qingseng to give him a parrot. That was really a little noisy. Su Qingseng was worried that she had been fooled, and that the bird didn't know how to talk. It seemed that she had been thinking too much. "Uncle." The sudden voice made the smile on Su Qingseng's face fade a little. She turned around, saw Zhang Yichen, and nodded slightly. "Uncle." When she saw Hua Jingyao, she immediately smiled again. She took a step forward and hooked her arm around his. "Finished working out?" "Yes." Hua Jingyao nodded. He looked at Su Qingseng with love in his eyes. Zhang Yichen stood next to them, watching them love each other. The way Hua Jingyao called Hua Jingyao "uncle" clearly separated them into 2 different generations. "Yes." Zhang Yichen glanced at Su Qingseng, then turned to old Master Hua. "Uncle, what were you talking about? Why did you sound so happy?" "I was talking about this bird. It's noisy." Old Master Hua thought the parrot was quite funny. "You're noisy. You're noisy." The bird usually stayed in the flower and bird shop. It had been trained by the owner to be very smart. Now it was quarreling with people. Su Qingseng couldn't help but want to laugh. However, because Zhang Yichen was standing next to her, she stopped laughing. Hua Jingyao couldn't help but raise his hand to rub the top of her head. "It knows how to quarrel with people." "I don't know." Su Qingseng looked at the bird hanging under the eaves and thought it was quite funny. "Anyway, when I tease it, it doesn't talk. But when someone scolds it, it gets excited. Seems like it's a stupid bird." Hua Jingyao gave the bird a stare as he spoke. "Stupid bird." As expected, the parrot suddenly became angry. It fluttered in the cage and said, "You're stupid. You're stupid." Ha ha ha. This time, both old Master Hua and Hua Jingyao laughed. The corners of Zhang Yichen's mouth turned up a little. He turned to look at Su Qingseng. "With this uncle, you won't be lonely anymore. Nice gift, niece-in-law." Chapter 494. Ignoring Zhang Yichen, Su Qingseng only had eyes for Hua Jingyao. "Jingyao, let's go eat. I'm hungry." "Okay." Hua Jingyao greeted old Master Hua and Zhang Yichen, then put his arm around Su Qingseng's waist and walked to the dining room. Zhang Yichen turned around to help old Master Hua. "Uncle, let's go eat too." "Okay." Old Master Hua didn't think too much. The 2 of them followed Su Qingseng and Hua Jingyao. Su Qingseng was talking to Hua Jingyao in a low voice. The parrot had made a lot of jokes in the past few days. She had wanted to buy it to say something auspicious. However, it refused to say anything auspicious and was very good at quarreling. She didn't expect it to do that. She even felt embarrassed. Hua Jingyao thought it was funny. It was fun to have a bird like that. Zhang Yichen helped old Master Hua up and talked to him, but his eyes were fixed on Su Qingseng. He also saw the faint smile on her face when she talked to Hua Jingyao. She wasn't stunning, but her eyes were full of flirtatious charm. Zhang Yichen saw the flirtatious charm unintentionally. There was a faint flame dancing in his eyes. However, that ball of flame was quickly suppressed by him. Zhang Yichen only stayed at the Hua mansion for 3 days, then went back to the army. After Su Qingseng found out who he was, she turned the matter over. She would just treat the previous small conflict as an unintentional act by the other party. She didn't take it seriously. So when she got off work, she was surprised to see Zhang Yichen suddenly appear in front of her office. It was already time to get off work, and the other doctors had left. There were still 2 doctors on duty in the office. When Su Qingseng saw him, she called him uncle. The other 2 doctors didn't pay attention to her. "What's up, uncle?" Su Qingseng looked at Zhang Yichen and knew that he had something to say. She picked up her bag and stood outside the office. "You're off work?" "Yes." "That's good. Come with me." Zhang Yichen was about to take Su Qingseng's hand when he spoke. She quickly stepped back and looked at Zhang Yichen, her eyes full of disapproval. "Uncle, what's the matter?" Zhang Yichen looked around, thought for a moment, then added, "Can you come with me now? Can I ask for your help? Tell me what's the matter first." Zhang Yichen's voice was soft, but he sounded anxious. "It's urgent. I need a doctor. Now, right now." Su Qingseng looked at him from head to toe. Only then did she notice that there seemed to be some inconspicuous bloodstains on his black coat. Those bloodstains were very familiar to her. Her expression suddenly became serious. "Do you need tools?" "Yes." Zhang Yichen nodded. "Can you hurry up? Wait for me." She went to the pharmacy, bought some medicine and bandages, and returned to her office to get a full set of scalpels. She moved quickly, spending less than 10 minutes. She followed Zhang Yichen out of the hospital and got into Zhang Yichen's car. After she got in the car, he quickly stepped on the accelerator and sped away. Su Qingseng wasn't used to the speed, but she didn't say anything. She just looked at the scenery outside. In less than 5 minutes, Zhang Yichen and Su Qingseng arrived at an inconspicuous apartment. The apartment was old, and the walls on both sides were mottled. Su Qingseng hesitated at the scene. Looking at Zhang Yichen's serious face, she followed him upstairs and entered the door. Almost as soon as she entered the door, she smelled blood. "Save him, hurry up." A man was lying on the bed in the room. Su Qingseng recognized him immediately. He was the man with the crew cut, whom she met in the alley last time. He was shot 3 times. 1 in the arm, 1 in the abdomen, and 1 in the leg. "Why didn't you send him to the hospital?" Su Qingseng asked. She walked up to the man and started to check his wounds. "We can't send him to the hospital." Zhang Yichen didn't explain further. Su Qingseng glanced at him, but didn't say anything. She focused on the man in front of her, who was covered in blood. The wounds on the arm and leg didn't look serious, but the one in the abdomen looked the most serious. The man was lucky. He had lost so much blood and been shot 3 times, but he was still alive. "I wanted to take the bullet out for him, but the bullet went in too deep. I was afraid that I might lose control." The wound was in the abdomen, and it was all internal organs. Zhang Yichen was afraid that he might accidentally cause a second injury, so he asked Su Qingseng for help. "I've already helped him deal with it first. I just bandaged the wound a little, but I need you to take the bullet out." "Got it." Su Qingseng didn't waste any more time. Although she was an obstetrician, she was familiar with stitching wounds. She took off her coat and put it outside, then put all the tools she brought with her on the side of the bed. She bent down, cut open the man's clothes and started to treat his wound. When she was treating him, she realized that the anesthesia she brought with her was useless. The man had already fainted because of the excessive blood loss. It was fine without anesthesia. He was shot in the abdomen. Fortunately, his internal organs weren't injured. Otherwise, Su Qingseng wouldn't have dared to treat him like this. The bullet barely grazed the man's stomach, almost causing it to perforate. Su Qingseng couldn't help but feel that the man was lucky. She had no time to care about anything else. She quickly took the bullet out of the man's leg, then the bullet in his arm. She took one and stitched the other. She didn't dare to delay. She was afraid that the man would die of blood loss because of her hesitation. Su Qingseng had been a doctor for so many years, and she had stitched the stomach of pregnant women the most. It was her first time stitching a man's stomach. Although it was fresh, she didn't dare to relax at all. Nearly 2 hours later, Su Qingseng finally finished treating all the wounds on the man's arm. After tying the bandage on the man's arm, Su Qingseng felt that her leg was a little numb when she stood up. It was such a cold day, and there was no heater in the room. Her back was covered with a thin layer of sweat. When she stood up, she saw Zhang Yichen, who had been waiting at the door. Su Qingsang's voice was very soft. It's done for now. For now. Zhang Yichen glanced at his comrade on the bed, whose face was still pale. What do you mean? He lost so much blood. Normally, he needs a blood transfusion. But you refused to send him to the hospital. Although I treated him in time, it was still very dangerous tonight. We need to watch him and make sure that he will wake up tomorrow morning. Then he will be fine. To be honest, the man had been shot 3 times and lost so much blood, but he was still alive. His vitality was quite strong. Thank you. Zhang Yichen understood. What happened next had nothing to do with Su Qingsang. He looked at the man and said, I will take care of him. Su Qingsang nodded. She moved her limbs, and when she met Zhang Yichen's eyes, she put her hands down uncomfortably. Then if there's nothing else, I'll leave now. I'll drive you. No need. Su Qingsang glanced at the man on the bed. You should take care of him. I'll just take a taxi back myself. After all, the man was seriously injured, and there was no blood transfusion. Su Qingsang wasn't 100% sure that he would be fine. Oh, he lost too much blood. He might have a fever in the middle of the night. Remember, don't let him have a fever. If you really can't control it, wipe his body with alcohol. She had brought alcohol with her to disinfect the wound, so there was still a lot left. She could give it to Zhang Yichen. Okay. I got it. Thank you. Zhang Yichen thanked her with sincerity. He looked completely different from when he teased her in the alley. Su Qingsang felt a little uncomfortable. She walked out of the room, picked up her bag and left. If there's nothing else, I'm leaving. Don't you need to deal with it? Zhang Yichen glanced at her. She had been treating the man's wound, so her clothes were stained with blood. It wasn't a good idea to run out like this. It's okay. I have a coat. Su Qingsang put on her coat as she spoke. In this way he really couldn't tell. Zhang Yichen didn't say anything. When Su Qingsang's hand touched the doorknob, he called her back again. Su Qingsang. Yes. Don't tell anyone about what happened today. Don't worry. I'm not that talkative. No, I'm also talking about Jingyao. Don't tell him. Su Qingsang turned to look at Zhang Yichen. When she saw the seriousness in his eyes, she nodded. And thank you. You're welcome. Although Su Qingsang didn't know what they were doing, she could guess a little. Since they wanted to keep it a secret, she wouldn't tell anyone. After leaving the apartment, Su Qingsang stood at the door and looked around. She took a turn and then left the alley. When Su Qingsang got home, Hua Jingyao was already there. He had obviously just taken a shower, and the ends of his hair were still wet. He was sitting on the bed reading a book. When he saw Su Qingsang come in, he put the book aside. His eyes fell on the bags in Su Qingsang's hands. You went shopping? Yes. Su Qingsang nodded and put down the bags. Did you call me? I was shopping and didn't hear you. I just saw you in the elevator. Have you eaten? Hua Jingyao got off the bed and walked to Su Qingsang. He noticed that she had changed her clothes. She wasn't wearing the clothes she had worn this morning. I've eaten. As Su Qingsang spoke, she picked up the bag by her feet and took out a Versace casual suit. It was dark striped and made of sapphire blue material. She compared it to Hua Jingyao and said, Try it on. Chapter 495. He looked at her inquisitively, but Su Qingsang didn't seem to notice it. She said calmly, I saw this suit on you when I was shopping, so I bought it. Su Qingsang wanted to go home after coming out of Zhang Yichen's apartment, but she thought of the blood stains on her clothes, so she decided to buy a new set of clothes. After buying the suit for herself, Su Qingsang passed by Versace and happened to see the casual suit in the display window. The style, the design, and the color made Su Qingsang think it looked good. She didn't know much about brands, but she knew that almost all of Hua Jinyao's clothes were high-end. But that didn't stop her from buying the suit for Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao looked at the eagerness in her eyes, put on the suit, and joked with Su Qingsang. You're unaccountably solicitous. Honey, did you do something wrong to me? Su Qingsang reached out and grabbed the front of Hua Jinyao's shirt. Yeah, I did something wrong to you. I went on a date with a man just now. I was afraid that you would find out, so I bought the suit to please you. Was he the only one who could talk nonsense? So could she. Hua Jinyao stopped putting on the suit, leaned over, and stared at Su Qingsang's face. Are you angry? I was joking. I'm serious. Su Qingsang blinked and looked at him, looking very serious. I really went out with a man, and stayed in the same room for more than 2 hours. Honey, I was wrong. I shouldn't have doubted you. Hua Jinyao looked at her, leaned over, and kissed her on the cheek, then quickly put on the suit. He was 188 meters tall, and his inverted triangular figure was a standard clothes rack. The royal blue suit made him look especially energetic. Su Qingsang took a step back and looked at Hua Jinyao. I have good taste, right? Of course. Hua Jinyao didn't care how the suit felt on him. He cared about Su Qingsang's feelings. Thank you, honey. You're welcome. Su Qingsang smiled and said, I did something wrong to you. Of course I have to treat you better. Honey. Hua Jinyao held her waist and lifted her up easily. I told you I was joking. I'm just kidding. Su Qingsang wanted to tell Hua Jinyao about what happened today. However, since Zhang Yichen said that she couldn't tell him, she wouldn't. She didn't know much about the army, but she understood that they had their own discipline. She thought for a long time. But in the end, she didn't tell Hua Jinyao what happened today. Su Qingsang didn't expect to see Zhang Yichen again at the Hua mansion that weekend. It was February in Rong City, and the weather was getting warmer. It had been almost a week since she had helped his friend with his work. Today, Zhang Yichen was wearing a military uniform, which made him look very different. Su Qingsang couldn't help but take a few more glances at him because of his military uniform. Zhang Yichen was handsome as well, but not in the same way as Hua Jinyao. His facial features were more defined, and he had thick eyebrows and big eyes. His tall and strong body made him look energetic. Wearing such a military uniform, he looked like a tall and straight pine tree. Su Qingsang suddenly thought of the news on the internet. Indeed, all the handsome men were handed over to the government. A soldier like that was indeed very handsome. However, as soon as she looked at him, she met Zhang Yichen's eyes. He nodded at her almost imperceptibly as a sign of acknowledgement. Su Qingsang remembered that she had helped him with the wound of the crew cut, and she took it as a gesture of goodwill. She quickly withdrew her gaze and sat across from Old Master Hua with Hua Jinyao. As soon as they sat down, Lu Tongjia and Hua Mingguang came downstairs. They didn't get along well with Lu Tongjia, so Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao stood up to greet the two elders. Speaking of which, Su Qingsang's way of addressing Lu Tongjia was really awkward. She should have called her mother like Hua Jinyao. However, Lu Tongjia obviously didn't like it. Su Qingsang had been in Rong City for so long, but she had never called Lu Tongjia mother. Zhang Yichen couldn't help but look at Su Qingsang's face for a while when she heard Lu Tongjia call her aunt. Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao didn't notice it. Only Lu Tongjia saw Zhang Yichen's eyes, and her face darkened. During dinner, Su Qingsang found that Lu Tongjia's face was very gloomy. It was as if someone had offended her. Especially when she looked at Su Qingsang. Her eyes were as sharp as knives. She didn't try to hide the dissatisfaction in her eyes. Other than dissatisfaction, there were some other emotions. Not only Su Qingsang, but even Old Master Hua and Zhang Yichen noticed that. I'm full. Lu Tongjia didn't eat much, but she put down her chopsticks and left early. For some reason, Su Qingsang felt a little nervous. She couldn't help but look at Hua Jinyao, asking him what was going on with her eyes. Hua Jinyao gave her a look to tell her that it was okay. It wasn't the first time that Lu Tongjia had disliked them. Su Qingsang couldn't stop worrying. But it wasn't the time to ask Hua Jinyao. The atmosphere during dinner was very strange. After dinner, Old Master Hua asked Hua Jinyao to play chess with him. Zhang Yichen sat on the side and watched. Su Qingsang found it boring, so she told Hua Jinyao and went upstairs. Just like before, Su Qingsang took a shower and read for a while. She found that Hua Jinyao hadn't come upstairs yet. She thought about it and went straight to the gym. To her surprise, Hua Jinyao wasn't there. Zhang Yichen was alone in the gym. He was sitting on the machine and lifting dumbbells. His military uniform had been taken off, and he was only wearing a vest. Su Qingsang could see his overly strong muscles and weak-colored skin at first glance. It was indecent. Su Qingsang was about to leave, but Zhang Yichen had already seen her. "Are you looking for Jinyao? He went to the study with my uncle." "Oh." Su Qingsang nodded and was about to leave. She thought of something and stopped. She turned around and looked at Zhang Yichen. "Is that guy okay?" Zhang Yichen had already put down the dumbbells. He stood up and walked towards Su Qingsang. "He's fine." Zhang Yichen walked up to Su Qingsang. She didn't know how long he had been exercising. His face was a little red, but he wasn't sweating. He did have a fever in the middle of the night. "I did what you told me to do to lower his body temperature. The fever went down, and he woke up the next day." "That's good." Su Qingsang was just asking casually. She was relieved to know that he was fine. After all, he was the first non-female patient she had ever treated. She turned around to leave, but Zhang Yichen reached out his hand to hold her hand. Su Qingsang looked at his hand and instinctively stepped back. She stepped back too quickly and tripped over her right foot. Not only did she fail to dodge, but she also fell backwards. The moment she lost her balance, Zhang Yichen quickly caught her. Su Qingsang's body leaned against Zhang Yichen's chest. Su Qingsang quickly stood up with her hands on his chest. Her hands touched his firm chest, and Zhang Yichen's hands were on her waist. Su Qingsang felt uncomfortable being so close to him. She took a big step back after she steadied herself. She looked at Zhang Yichen with an unfriendly gaze. Zhang Yichen seemed to know what she was upset about, but his expression didn't change. "I'm sorry. I just wanted to thank you." "No need." Su Qingsang's voice was cold. "You already said that last time." "Yes, he already said that last time." This time, he just wanted to find an excuse to talk to her again. She was very close to him. The familiar aroma from last time rushed into his nose again. It was her aroma. He moved his toes slightly. He almost wanted to step forward and hold her like he did just now. However, Su Qingsang obviously didn't like him. She didn't even say a word to him. She turned around and left. Her footsteps were a little hurried, and she walked a little fast. Zhang Yichen's eyes followed her back until she disappeared around the corner. He couldn't see her anymore. He stood there and took a deep breath. He felt that the aroma didn't go away. Instead, it made him feel more and more distinct. Su Qingsang, he repeated the name in his heart. He was so focused that he didn't notice that Lu Tongjia was standing in the shadows at the other end of the corridor. Seeing the two of them hugging each other, even though she couldn't hear what they were talking about, it was enough for Lu Tongjia to imagine a lot of things. Her face was dark and cold, and she went up the other end of the passage through the kitchen to her room. Lu Tongjia asked Mrs. Su to go to the spa in the afternoon. Mrs. Su was Su Ruoli's mother. Because the two families had almost become in-laws, they had been in contact a lot. She often saw Mrs. Su. If it weren't for Hua Jinyao's refusal to marry Su Ruoli, their children would have been grown up. This time it was even worse. She didn't know what Hua Jinyao said to Su Ruoli, but Su Ruoli said she was going abroad to study at the end of last year. She hadn't been home for several months. Mrs. Su didn't like Su Ruoli's behavior, but she knew that it was all Hua Jinyao's fault. However, she didn't even dare to blame Su Ruoli. Who could she blame for her daughter's stubbornness? Now that she had met Lu Tongjia, she had to be polite and polite. They went to the club and accidentally ran into Li Xiangyuan, who was with He Xianyao. The mother and daughter seemed to be there for the spa as well. Tongjia. Li Xiangyuan's eyes were full of surprise when she saw Lu Tongjia. What a coincidence. I didn't expect to see you here. Li Xiangyuan was Li Juanqing's aunt. Li Xiangyuan was born in the Li family and married into the He family. She was also He Xiankai and He Xuanyao's mother. The He family was not as powerful as the Hua family, let alone the Li family. However, the Li family had a lot of resources. When Li Xiangyuan married into the He family, it was considered a low marriage. She and Lu Tongjia had known each other since they were young and had a good relationship. It is quite a coincidence. Lu Tongjia greeted her and immediately saw He Xianyao, who was next to her. If she remembered correctly, He Xianyao had taken all kinds of opportunities to come to her house. She also knew that He Xianyao liked Hua Jinyao. Auntie Hua. He Xianyao had always been good in front of Lu Tongjia, and it was the same now. Chapter 496. Didn't He Xianyao visit the Hua family so often because she liked Hua Jinyao? If Hua Jinyao had married He Xianyao at that time, their children would have grown up by now. He Xianyao cared about Hua Jinyao so much that she wouldn't want to have children. Not to mention that Hua Jinyao would coax and flatter her every day. Thinking of this, Lu Tongjia looked at He Xianyao in a different way. He Xianyao felt a little uncomfortable under Lu Tongjia's gaze. The smile on her face froze. Lu Tongjia looked away and said calmly, "Since we met, let's go together. Just put it on my card for today." After the spa, Lu Tongjia suggested that they go for afternoon tea together. It was rare for her to be so interested in the spa. She was more enthusiastic than usual. The other three felt it, but they didn't know what Lu Tongjia wanted to do. After they went to a restaurant in a nearby 5-star hotel, Lu Tongjia pulled He Xianyao over and asked her to sit next to her. "Xianyao used to visit me often, but she hasn't been coming lately. Why? You don't like me anymore?" "Why would I?" He Xianyao had been humiliated by Hua Jinyao. How could she go back to the Hua family? Although she didn't want to, the He family's business in Lin City had been taken away. She was really afraid of Hua Jinyao. "If you don't, you can come again next time. I'm old now, and I like to spend time with you young people." "Auntie, you must be joking. You're not old. If I hang out with you now, people will think that you're my sister. You're such a sweet talker." Lu Tongjia's smile became brighter. "I took it seriously. Next time, you have to come to see me more often." He Xianyao didn't understand what Lu Tongjia meant. Li Xiangyuan looked at Lu Tongjia's face and changed the topic. "I heard that your son got married. Jinyao has high standards. You might as well ask your daughter-in-law to accompany you instead of Xianyao." Lu Tongjia's face darkened when Li Xiangyuan mentioned Su Qingsang. She didn't hide her attitude at all. Mrs. Su and Li Xiangyuan looked at each other. Mrs. Su couldn't hide her curiosity and asked curiously, "What's wrong? You're married and you're not happy?" "Happy? What was there to be happy about? Marrying a woman like that, he had no family background, no filial piety, and most importantly, his character was questionable." Every time she thought of what Su Qingsang had done with Zhang Yichen, she wanted to tell Hua Jinyao everything. However, she also knew that she didn't have any substantial evidence. Hua Jinyao was so obsessed with Su Qingsang that he wouldn't believe anything she said. She didn't speak, so the other two didn't know where to start. Lu Tongjia didn't want to talk about Su Qingsang. She felt disgusted. When they parted, she held He Xianyao's hand and kept asking her to play. He didn't forget to say some specious words. She had always wanted a daughter-in-law like He Xianyao who had a good family background and a good family background. She wouldn't be an illegitimate daughter like Su Qingsang, who recognized her halfway. An illegitimate daughter was an illegitimate daughter. She couldn't be brought to the table. Hua Jinyao was obsessed and treated a blade of grass like a treasure. Lu Tongjia talked for a long time. Seeing that He Xianyao understood what she meant, she left. As soon as she left, Mrs. Su also left. He Xianyao sat in her seat and looked at Li Xiangshuan. She was confused. "Mom, what do you think Auntie Hua meant?" "I think she's dissatisfied with her daughter-in-law and wants Hua Jinyao to find another one." "That's impossible." She had heard a lot about the relationship between Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang in Lin City, even though she didn't see them every day. How could Lu Tongjia have such a thought? "Didn't you hear her? She said that some women are so greedy these days. They don't want to have children, and they don't want to be filial to their elders." Li Xiangshuan was a smart woman. Hearing this, she understood everything. Even if Lu Tongjia didn't say it out loud, how could he not understand her insinuations? He Xuanyao's eyes lit up because of Li Xiangshuan's words, but only for a second. She thought of the humiliation she had suffered at the hands of Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang. She was a little scared. "Mom, then tell me. Are you stupid? You'd better not get involved in this kind of thing. After all, they are mother and son. She's just dissatisfied now. When she gets over it, they'll be fine. But you'll be in trouble." After all, Li Xiangshuan had lived for a few years. She had seen this kind of thing many times. He Xianyao stopped talking. but she couldn't suppress the thought in her heart. She hadn't fought back against Su Qingsang when she humiliated her last time. But she couldn't say that to others. If she could get Lu Tongjia's support and push Su Qingsang down from the position of the young madam of the Hua family. Li Xiangshuan was still explaining the situation, clearly telling her not to get involved with the Hua family. However, He Xianyao already had an idea, so she didn't listen to a word. Seeing that her daughter didn't object, Li Xiangshuan left with her. After these people left, the place became quiet. But no one noticed that behind them, there was a spot that was blocked by a potted plant. Su Peijian sat there, and the smile on her face looked very strange. Su Qingsang had slowly adapted to life in Rong City. Other than when she was on duty, she would go back to the Hua family, with Hua Jingyao on weekends to spend time with old Master Hua. Although Lu Tongjia still didn't like her, she was mentally strong and didn't take Lu Tongjia's dislike to heart. As Hua Jingyao said, as long as old Master Hua was on their side, it didn't matter how much Lu Tongjia didn't like her. As for Zhang Yichen, he disappeared again after that day. Hua Jingyao mentioned that he went back to the army. Hua Jingyao seemed to be really close to this uncle of his. She could hear the closeness in Hua Jinyao's words. In fact, not only Hua Jingyao, but old Master Hua also liked this nephew very much. Every time Zhang Yichen was mentioned, he was full of praise. Su Qingsang didn't know if it was an illusion, but every time old Master Hua and Hua Jingyao talked about Zhang Yichen, she always saw Lu Tongjia's face darken. Gradually, Su Qingsang figured out that Lu Tongjia didn't like Zhang Yichen, her cousin. However, what was the reason for this? At night, when they were sleeping, Su Qingsang rubbed her face against Hua Jinyao's chest and looked up at him. She wanted to say something but didn't. She mentioned her doubts to Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao looked at her with a smile on his face. Do you care about my mother or my uncle? Do you care about my uncle? I don't care about either. Lu Tongjia didn't like Su Qingsang. She always talked to her like that. As for Zhang Yichen, there was a misunderstanding between them. Su Qingsang later found out that he was just trying to scare her, but she still felt uncomfortable. She wanted to stay far away from him. She only asked out of curiosity. I'm just curious. Hua Jinyao didn't care about her curiosity. He put his arms around her and rested his chin on Su Qingsang's head. My mother doesn't even like her own son. How could she like my uncle? He said in a low voice. Su Qingsang said almost without thinking. Then, why does your mother dislike you? It was so strange. She knew it since she came to Rong City. Lu Tongjia didn't like Hua Jinyao at all, and it was unreasonable. Hua Jinyao was Lu Tongjia's only son. He was also the eldest son of the Hua family. Why didn't Lu Tongjia like him? Even though Su Qinghui loved Su Peijian, he didn't dislike Su Yusen. Even though she was an illegitimate daughter at that time, Su Qinghui just ignored her. He wouldn't treat her the way Lu Tongjia did. Su Qingsang didn't hear a reply. She instinctively wanted to look up, but Hua Jinyao pressed the back of her head tightly, not letting her look at him. Hua Jinyao. She wanted to see him clearly, but Hua Jinyao was very strong. He pressed her with one hand and turned off the light with the other. Go to sleep. Su Qingsang didn't move. She could hear that Hua Jinyao's voice was much softer than before, but she didn't understand why. Jinyao, go to sleep. Hua Jinyao put his arms around her and lay down. He put his arms around her waist. The light in the room had been turned off. She couldn't see his expression, and she had no way of knowing what he was feeling. Since he didn't want to answer that question, Su Qingsang didn't ask. She put her arms around his waist and rubbed her face against his chest. She didn't ask again. Hua Jinyao didn't say anything. He felt the soft body of the person in his arms pressed tightly against him. She still had shower gel on her body, and there was a faint fragrance mixed with her own. He took a deep breath. He felt that his heartbeat, which had been disordered because of Su Qingsang's question, slowly returned to normal. Su Qingsang had been busy the whole day, so she was sleepy. She closed her eyes and fell asleep not long after. Hua Jinyao couldn't fall asleep. Listening to Su Qingsang's steady breathing in the dark, he slightly tightened his arms. After he fell asleep, he didn't hold her so tightly anymore. That night the nightmare came again. The small dark room. It was a mess everywhere. He ran in a panic, and behind him, the footsteps were getting closer and closer. Finally, an enlarged, extremely ferocious face came closer. The voice that came out of his mouth had troubled him for more than 20 years. Go to hell! Go to hell! The chaotic images that kept flashing through his mind, as well as the words go to hell. It made Hu Jingyao fall into a nightmare. What was different from the past was that he didn't wake up this time. His body was stiff, and his hands unconsciously began to exert force. Su Qingsang was woken up by the heat. In such weather, she felt the hands around her waist getting tighter and tighter. Chapter 497. Before she was fully awake, Su Qingsang heard some heavy breathing in the room. She raised her head. She couldn't see Hu Jinyao's expression clearly in the dark, but she could feel that his breathing was heavy. Su Qingsang raised her hand to turn on the bedside lamp, and found that Hu Jinyao was sweating. She had never seen Hu Jinyao like this. Jinyao? Hu Jinyao? There was no response. Hu Jinyao's brows were tightly knitted, and his face was abnormally red. More and more sweat appeared on his forehead. Su Qingsang could tell that Hu Jinyao was in a terrible nightmare at the moment. Su Qingsang reached out to pat his face. Hu Jinyao seemed to pause for a moment, but soon he frowned again. Hu Jinyao? Su Qingsang called again, but found that Hu Jinyao showed no signs of waking up. She leaned over, held his face with both hands, and kissed his lips hard. At first, Hu Jinyao's body was very stiff, but slowly he relaxed. Later, his forehead stopped sweating, and then he woke up. When he opened his eyes and saw what Su Qingsang was doing to him, Hu Jinyao was stunned for a moment. You're awake. It was the first time Su Qingsang saw Hu Jinyao like this, and she was really scared. Are you okay? Hu Jinyao blinked and thought of the nightmare. He reached out and held Su Qingsang in his arms. Did I scare you? No. Su Qingsang was worried about him. She propped herself up and looked at his face. His forehead was still sweating. She reached out and took a tissue from the bedside table to wipe his sweat. Hu Jinyao let her do whatever she wanted, and looked at her beautiful face, which was right in front of him. He suddenly flipped over and pressed her under his body. He lowered his head and kissed her lips heavily. It was different from the gentleness she had when she kissed him just now. His kiss was fierce, domineering, and lingering. Ever since the two of them got together, Su Qingsang hadn't seen Hu Jinyao so fierce for a long time. She closed her eyes and let him do whatever he wanted. She felt that he was filling her and becoming one with her. He was crazier than ever before. She responded by wrapping her arms around his waist so that he could indulge more. When it was all over, both of them were sweating. However, Su Qingsang was not in a hurry to take a shower. He was still on top of her, and her hand was still on his back. Are you all right? Su Qingsang sounded a little nervous. Hu Jinyao remained silent. He buried his face into Su Qingsang's neck. She felt his breath brushing against the skin of her neck. It was a little itchy and a little hot. He did not say anything, and she did not rush him. Subconsciously, she gently stroked his sweaty back. Again and again, she gently patted his back as if she was coaxing a child. Hu Jinyao closed his eyes and took a deep breath. I'm fine. What could have happened to him? It was all in the past. He was no longer that child. He had grown up. Su Qingsang's lips moved. She wanted to ask him what had happened. She wanted to ask him what he was dreaming about. But in the end, she didn't ask anything. She gently patted his back until she was tired and fell into a deep sleep. Hu Jinyao propped himself up after she fell asleep and looked at her little face, which was flushed because of the entanglement just now. He lowered his head and gently kissed her on the forehead. He carefully turned over and held her in his arms. He found a relatively more comfortable position so that she could sleep better. He stopped thinking about the nightmare and the hideous face in the dream. Hu Jinyao did not have any more dreams. Su Qingsang observed him for a few more nights after that day, but she did not see Hu Jinyao have any more nightmares. Of course, it was also possible that he had a nightmare, but she did not notice it. After all, she slept very well most of the time. If she slept too deeply, even if he had a nightmare, she might not know. But after that day, Su Qingsang did not ask Hu Jinyao about the dream that night. After returning to the apartment in the city, Hua Jinyao became even busier. During this period of time, he had several times more social engagements than before. Sometimes he would ask her, but most of the time, she did not like to go to social engagements. Hua Jinyao did not force her. If she did not want to go, he would ask Yang Wenchang. She was still curious about Hua Jinyao's nightmare. She had a feeling that Hua Jinyao's nightmare had something to do with Lu Tongjia. Why did Lu Tongjia not like Hua Jinyao? Why did Hua Jinyao have a nightmare? She believed that the two things were related. Hua Mingguang and Hua Jinyao must know, but they would not say it. Su Qingseng thought of one person, Old Master Hua. Maybe when she went to the Hua family on Friday, she could ask Old Master Hua in private. When Su Qingseng and Hua Jinyao entered the living room, they were stunned by the lively scene in front of them. In the living room, Old Master Hua was not there, nor was Hua Mingguang. Hua Mingmei and Hua Mingliang's families, who usually came, were not there. Other than Lu Tongjia, Li Wanyu, and He Xianyao were sitting on the sofa. He Xianyao was very smart. She knew that Hua Jinyao did not like her, and she had been ignored by him several times. However, Lu Tongjia's words moved her, so she couldn't help but want to try. But she was afraid that she would be humiliated by Hua Jinyao like before. So she called Li Wanyu. Li Wanyu was Li Juanxing's younger sister and her cousin. They had a good relationship. Most importantly, Hua Jinyao was very close to Li Junsheng. Hua Jinyao would not respect her, but he would respect Li Junsheng. But that was only He Xuanyao's opinion. Hua Jinyao would respect Li Junsheng, but only if Li Wanyu did not cause trouble. Brother Jinyao. Li Wanyu stood up when she saw Hua Jinyao. She had no other feelings for Hua Jinyao. She just saw him as a big brother. Knowing that he was married, but the person he married was neither Su Ruoli nor He Xianyao, made her feel a little uncomfortable. In her opinion, only the noble ladies in Rong City were worthy of Hua Jinyao. As for Su Qingseng, who appeared out of nowhere, who knew what kind of person she was, she had snatched Hua Jinyao away so easily, especially He Xianyao, who had been visiting the Hua family so frequently. Everyone knew that Lu Tongjia liked her and wanted her to be her daughter-in-law. But now they were robbed by an outsider. She had become a joke in Rong City. So when she heard He Xianyao say that Lu Tongjia only wanted her to accompany Hua Jinyao, she came without thinking. Last time, Hua Jinyao embarrassed them in front of Su Qingseng. Now, they had a chance to see Su Qingseng embarrass herself. They were all looking forward to it. Thinking of this, when Li Wanyu looked at Su Qingseng again, there was a faint emotion in her eyes. She probably didn't know that Lu Tongjia disliked her so much. Did she really think that she could be the young madam of the Hua family by marrying Hua Jinyao? Chapter 498. Su Qingseng saw He Xianyao at first glance. Naturally, she didn't miss the gloating look in Li Wanyu's eyes. She turned to look at Hua Jinyao and gave him a look. Hua Jinyao reached out and squeezed her palm, indicating that she had him to take care of everything. The corners of Su Qingseng's mouth lifted slightly. She found that she quite trusted Hua Jinyao now. The feeling of trusting a person, especially a man, was too subtle. But she found that she didn't have the initial resistance. Jinyao. Li Wanyu didn't miss the small interaction between Su Qingseng and Hua Jinyao. To be honest, she felt a little uncomfortable. She felt that ever since Hua Jinyao got married, he had become less and less like the old Hua Jinyao. She would rather Hua Jinyao be as cold and aloof as he used to be. She didn't want him to ignore other women and only treat Su Qingseng well. Brother Jinyao, Xianyao and I happened to be free today, so we came to visit Auntie. We were just talking about you. Yeah, Hua Jinyao responded. Brother Jinyao. Li Wanyu was obviously dissatisfied with his cold attitude. However, He Xianyao tugged at her sleeve at this moment. After receiving He Xuanyao's hint, Li Wanyu stopped talking for the time being. Since you're back, it's just in time. Aunt Zhou has prepared dinner. You can eat later. As she spoke, she looked at He Xianyao affectionately, and even reached out to pull her to her side. Stay and have dinner with me today. As long as Auntie doesn't mind. How could I dislike it? Lu Tongjia glanced at Su Qingseng out of the corner of her eye as she spoke. You're getting old, so it's inevitable that people will dislike you. You don't know how happy I am that you are willing to accompany me. Su Qingsang looked at the scene in front of her, speechless. People who didn't know better would think that He Xianyao was Lu Tongjia's child. Hua Jinyao squeezed her hand. His expression didn't change at all. Mom, where are Dad and Grandpa? Your grandfather went to your granduncle's place. Lu Tongjia had called He Xianyao over because the old man wasn't home today. If the old man was here, He Xianyao wouldn't have a chance. Not only was old Master Hua not there, but she also asked Hua Mingguang to send old Master Hua over. Li Wanyu sat at the dining table, watching Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao sitting together. Even if she didn't like Su Qingsang, she had to admit it. When the two of them sat down, their bodies actually had a similar aura. One was handsome, and the other was delicate. Most importantly, she watched Hua Jinyao put food and ladle soup into Su Qingsang's bowl naturally. It looked like he was very skilled. When had she ever seen Hua Jinyao like that? For a moment their eyes widened. Even though she had no romantic feelings for Hua Jinyao, she couldn't help but feel jealous when she saw how well he treated a woman. Speaking of which, Hua Jinyao was obviously the one who had known them longer, wasn't he? When had they ever seen him being nice to little sisters from aristocratic families like them? Li Wanyu was fine. Even if she felt uncomfortable, there was no love between a man and a woman, so she only felt her teeth ache. Did these two do it on purpose? She didn't believe that they were usually like this. He Xianyao had the same thought as Li Wanyu. She thought the scene in front of her was a public display of affection. Brother Jinyao, does Miss Su have no hands? Does she even need you to put food into her bowl? Su Qingsang, who had picked up her bowl of soup, was stunned and looked up at He Xianyao. She was about to speak, but Hua Jinyao pressed the back of her hand. Miss He is so young. How can she not see? He Xuanyao's face darkened. Seeing Lu Tongjia staring at Hua Jinyao angrily, she regained her courage and said, Of course I can see Miss Su's hands. She's an adult, but she still needs you to take care of her. Thinking about it, Brother Jinyao, you must be working hard. It's not hard at all. Hua Jinyao looked calm. Instead of restraining himself, he put more food into Su Qingsang's bowl with his chopsticks. I like to take care of her. Do you have a problem with that? He Xuanyao's face was pale. She felt like she was sitting on pins and needles. Enough. Lu Tongjia glanced at He Xianyao. How could she be liked by Hua Jinyao? She used to think that she was smart. How could she be so stupid? Let's eat. Why are you talking so much? She said to Hua Jinyao. She looked at He Xianyao again. Although she hated her for being so useless, she softened her tone and said, Xianyao, Hua Jinyao is just like that. He's not targeting you. Don't take it to heart. Su Qingsang really admired Lu Tongjia at this moment. She was really good at lying through her teeth. Looking at Hua Jinyao, she quietly put some beef into his bowl with her chopsticks and smiled at him. The meaning of that look was quite obvious. See, I'm taking care of you too. Hua Jinyao smiled. The corners of his mouth turned up, and he seemed to be in a good mood. He liked that Su Qingsang looked cold, but from time to time, she would show a bit of slyness like a fox. The interaction between the two of them seemed to be carried out quietly, but they weren't blind. Li Wanyu looked at Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang, then looked at He Xianyao. She suddenly felt that He Xuanyao's fighting ability was so weak that she probably had no chance. She had come here for nothing. Looking at Hua Jinyao, he didn't care about anyone else. Although she was spoiled, she was also proud. Naturally, she wouldn't do anything that would lower her status. Maybe she should listen to her brother and stay out of these things. Li Wanyu thought for a while and understood, but He Xianyao didn't. She had liked Hua Jinyao before. Later, when she was humiliated, she not only refused to give up, but also became more and more unwilling. Now, with Lu Tongjia's support, she felt that she could still fight for him. After dinner, Li Wanyu sat with Su Qingsang for a while. She saw that Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao were so intimate, as if there was no one else around. She was more and more sure of her previous thoughts. The most important thing was that she still had to worry about Li Junsheng. If Li Junsheng knew that she had intervened in Hua Jinyao's business, he would probably be unhappy. Thinking of this, Li Wanyu didn't want to stay any longer, so she got up and said goodbye. Lu Tongjia was surprised that Li Wanyu wanted to leave so early, But Li Wanyu wasn't the highlight of the night, so she didn't have to ask her to stay. She asked Hua Jingyao to see Li Wanyu off. When she asked He Xianyao to come today, she specifically told her not to drive over. Hua Jingyao sat next to Su Qingsang and didn't move. Don't we have a chauffeur at home? Lu Tongjia's face suddenly darkened. You and Junxing are so close. What's wrong? Can't you take your sister home for a while? It's okay. It's the same if the chauffeur takes her home. Li Wanyu was smart now. No matter what Lu Tongjia and He Xianyao wanted to do, she didn't want to get involved. No way. Let Jinyao take you home. Lu Tongjia was very insistent. She stared at Hua Jinyao with obvious dissatisfaction. She had made up her mind to let him take Li Wanyu home. Jinyao, just take her home. Su Qingsang didn't know what Lu Tongjia was planning, but she didn't mind seeing what else Lu Tongjia wanted to do. Hua Jinyao gave Su Qingsang a disapproving look, but Su Qingsang winked at him. The two of them had been together for a few months, and had gradually developed a tacit understanding. Hua Jinyao understood with one look from her. Although he didn't agree, he still stood up and said, Wanyu, let's go. After all, she was Li Juanqing's sister, and lived not far from the Hua family. She reluctantly took her home. Hua Jinyao left, leaving only Lu Tongjia, Su Qingsang, and He Xianyao in the living room. Lu Tongjia held He Xuanyao's hand, and talked to her affectionately. Su Qingsang looked at the two of them, who were as warm as mother and daughter. Not only did she not feel annoyed, but she also found it interesting. He Xianyao was a little proud at first, but this smugness soon disappeared. Su Qingsang didn't look sad at all. She didn't even look aggrieved. Instead, she looked like she was watching a good show. Didn't she care about Lu Tongjia's feelings for her at all? She didn't know that Su Qingsang was really strong-willed. As an illegitimate daughter, she was ignored by Li Qianxue, and looked down on by the servants of the Li family. Compared to them, Lu Tongjia's case was nothing. Lu Tongjia looked at Su Qingsang's calm face, and her anger rose little by little. She patted He Xuanyao's hand and said with a sigh, Speaking of which, Jinyao has been busy with work these years. Thank you for coming here to keep me company. Auntie, you're welcome. I'm not being polite. I really like you. Lu Tongjia glared at Su Qingsang as she spoke. Her attitude towards He Xianyao was completely different from how she treated Su Qingsang. She looked at He Xianyao as if she was looking at her own daughter. Xianyao, it would be great if you were my daughter-in-law. Auntie. No matter how thick-skinned He Xianyao was, she was still very embarrassed. I'm telling the truth. You're so polite and considerate. I believe that if you were my daughter-in-law, you would take good care of Jinyao, and not just let him take care of you. As she spoke, she glanced at Su Qingsang again. The meaning of that look was very obvious. Su Qingsang didn't seem to see it. She touched her nose and felt that the scene in front of her was quite interesting. But it's not too late. Xianyao, are you willing to be my daughter-in-law? Su Qingsang blinked. She, the main character, was still here. Was it really okay for them to say this in front of me? Auntie. He Xianyao blushed. I am willing. Su Qingsang was glad that she didn't drink water. If she drank water now, she would definitely spit it out. I knew I was right about you. Lu Tongjia breathed a sigh of relief. When she looked at Su Qingsang, there was contempt in the corner of her eyes. After all, you're much better than some selfish people who only care about themselves. Auntie. After hearing that, Su Qingsang asked casually, Does Jinyao have any other brothers? Don't play dumb. I'm talking about Jinyao. Chapter 499. Auntie. He Xianyao was embarrassed, but she still nodded. I do. Lu Tongjia seemed to have found some courage. She turned to Su Qingsang and said, Did you hear that? She does. Yes. Su Qingsang nodded. She wasn't deaf. Miss He likes to be a mistress. If she hadn't wanted to figure out what Lu Tongjia and He Xianyao were up to, she would have left already. She didn't expect to hear such a ridiculous conversation. Since they were so shameless, she couldn't be blamed for being rude. He Xuanyao's face turned from red to white. She stared at Su Qingsang, as if she wanted to burn a hole in her body. What are you talking about? Lu Tongjia couldn't bear it anymore. Who wants to be a mistress? If you don't want to be a mistress, how do you plan to marry Jinyao? Su Qingsang blinked. Her pretty face was full of confusion. Why do I remember that I'm Jinyao's wife? Why don't you just divorce Jinyao? Lu Tongjia looked at Su Qingsang and didn't hide her dissatisfaction. Why don't you look at yourself? How are you good enough for Jinyao? Auntie, it's not up to you or me to decide whether I'm good enough for him or not. It's up to Jinyao to decide. Don't you think so? You. At the very least, if Jinyao wants a divorce or has other thoughts, he'll come to me himself. It's not right for you to make the decision for him. Su Qingsang, you think you have him in your hands, don't you? Auntie, you may have misunderstood. Su Qingsang knew that Lu Tongjia didn't like her, but she didn't really mind. After all, she wasn't money. Not everyone liked her. Jinyao and I are equal. I don't have him in my hands, and he doesn't need me to. That's one thing. Secondly, Jinyao and I have registered our marriage certificate. We are legally married. Our relationship is protected by the law. Even you don't have the right to ask for a divorce. Su Qingsang, don't you feel ashamed saying that? What did you do to make Jinyao marry you? Do you really think other people are stupid and can't figure it out? What method did she use? Su Qingsang blinked her eyes. She really didn't know when she had played tricks on Jinyao. Su Qingsang, if you still want to save face, you should take the initiative to give up your position. Don't make everyone look bad when the time comes. Auntie, I'm sorry. It was precisely because I wanted face that I couldn't give up my position. After all, I didn't cheat, and I didn't do anything wrong. Why should I ask to leave the court? You haven't done anything wrong. You don't even want to have children. Why would the Hua family need a daughter-in-law like you? Or have you changed your mind now? Are you willing to have children now? I don't want to. Su Qingsang was not averse to having children. After all, she was an obstetrician and gynecologist. She just felt that it was still too early for her to have a child 2 years later. However, now that she was provoked by Lu Tongjia's aggressive attitude, she became rebellious. Auntie, I can tell you very clearly. I've already discussed it with Jinyao. We don't plan on having children anytime soon. Huh. Lu Tongjia was so angry that she laughed. Listen. You don't want to have children with Jinyao, and you want to stop others from having children? How can you do that in the world? Su Qingsang frowned. Before she could speak, Lu Tongjia continued. You saw it yourself. Xianyao is better than you in all aspects, whether in terms of family background or appearance. Most importantly, she is sincere to Jinyao. She doesn't have any ulterior motives. She is willing to do everything for Jinyao, to bear his children. You can't do those things. If you have self-awareness, you should divorce Jinyao as soon as possible. Don't waste his time. Xianyao blushed and sat on the side without saying anything. Su Qingsang looked at the shy look on her face and suddenly smiled. Auntie, I don't dare to say whether I will waste his time or not. But if Miss He really wants to be with him, I'm afraid that will really be a waste of his time. Her slightly narrowed eyes were full of cunning. She had known that Xianyao was shameless for a long time. Since that was the case, there was no need to save her face. After all, she took off her clothes and slept with Jinyao, but he didn't have any reaction. Under such circumstances, how could Jinyao have a child with her? Xianyao's face was like a color palette that had been overturned. Her face was green, then white, then red, then black. She looked at Su Qingsang and suddenly stood up. She bit her lip and was about to rush out. Xianyao. Lu Tongjia grabbed her hand and turned to look at Su Qingsang. What nonsense are you talking about? You can ask Jinyao whether I'm talking nonsense or not. Su Qingsang stood up. She was tired of watching the show and didn't want to see it anymore. Miss He, if you want to have a child with Jinyao, I won't object. But the premise is that you can find a way to make Jinyao interested in you. Otherwise, how are you going to have a child? You are shameless. Xianyao knew what she had done, but when she saw the faint doubt on Lu Tongjia's face, she couldn't say what she had done. She turned to Su Qingsang and said, Don't be too proud. Jinyao is just infatuated with you. He will see it sooner or later. Yes, it's okay. Infatuation is better than not having feelings for you. But you should think about what you can do next time. After all, you stripped naked in front of a man, but he ignored you. That's so embarrassing. He Xianyao bit her lip hard. She didn't care that Lu Tongjia was still holding her hand. She shook off Lu Tongjia's hand and rushed out without looking back. She left in a hurry, but Su Qingseng could still hear her sobbing and see a few drops of tears falling from her eyes. Lu Tongjia's face darkened. She stared at Su Qingseng with her sharp eyes, as if she wanted to pierce through her. Okay. I didn't know that you were such a sharp-tongued person. Auntie, you are too kind. Su Qingseng took it as a compliment. I'm actually quite clumsy. I just like to tell the truth. Lu Tongjia's face turned green. Okay. You are indeed a schemer. I want to see. How long can you use those tricks on Jinyao? Auntie, I want to know too. How about I ask him for you next time? Su Qingseng found that she was becoming more and more shameless in front of Lu Tongjia. Lu Tongjia was so angry that she couldn't speak. In the end, she could only glare at Su Qingseng, turn around, and go upstairs without looking back. Su Qingseng felt a little helpless. Although she knew that it wasn't entirely her fault, she felt a little wronged that Lu Tongjia hated her so much. She turned around and saw that Hu Jinyao had come back. He stood at the gate and looked at her with a faint smile on his face. You're back. Before she could walk up to him, Hu Jinyao had already walked up to her, reached out, and pulled her into his arms. He lowered his head and kissed her forehead, with a smile on his face. You didn't give it away? Why are you back so soon? Not far. Hu Jinyao didn't want to tell her that he had warned Li Wanyu in the car. He was willing to care about his friendship with Li Junsheng, but Li Wanyu had to think clearly about whether she was going to go against him. He suddenly lowered his head and pressed his forehead against her face. He Xianyao wants to have children with me. You don't object? Huh. What are you thinking? Su Qingseng blushed. Did he hear that? I'm not interested in her. Hu Jinyao suddenly carried her in his arms. But I don't agree with what you said. He lowered his head and looked at her, his eyes full of seriousness. Next time, if someone says they want to have children with me, you can just say that I don't agree. After all, I'm yours now. Su Qingseng put her arms around his neck when she lost her balance. She also raised her head to look at him. Mine alone? Of course. Mrs. Hua. Su Qingseng smiled because of the way he called her Mrs. Hua. The drama she had just watched would be a sideshow. She took the initiative to put her lips on his and gave him a sweet kiss. However, when she was about to move away, Hu Jinyao caught her lips and deepened the kiss. With his tall figure, Hu Jinyao easily carried Su Qingseng upstairs. As for He Xianyao, who had made such a scene today, who cared about her? When Su Qingseng saw Shi Mengwan at the airport, her face was especially bright. She almost jumped up and hugged her. Previously, Shi Mengwan had said that she would come to Rong City to play with her. However, after waiting for more than a week, there was no news. She thought that she wouldn't come. Seriously, you only sent me a message before you got on the plane. Fortunately, I didn't have surgery today. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to pick you up. Although she didn't have surgery today, she had to go to work. Fortunately, Sun Huiya saw that she usually behaved well. She agreed immediately when she asked for leave for a while. I just wanted to give you a surprise. Shi Mengwan pulled her clothes. Although it was already spring in Rong City, it was much colder than Lin City. Although it was already spring, it was much colder than Lin City. Looking around, she was a little disappointed. Why is there no snow? Did you think there would be snow? It melted long ago. Why didn't you say so earlier? I'll take you to the snow country next time. The snow had melted long ago. Besides, even in the north it didn't snow every day. Okay. But this time, I'll eat you first. Warmly welcome. Su Qingseng took the luggage from her hands and took her to the parking lot outside. After putting her luggage in her car, Su Qingseng and Hu Jinyao got in. When Shi Mengwan got off the plane, she wore a scarf and sunglasses. Now that she was in the car, she took off the scarf and sunglasses, revealing her face. Su Qingseng was about to start the car, but when she saw her face, she stopped. She leaned over and stared at Shi Mengwan's face. Chapter 500. Really? Shi Mengwan touched her face and looked at Su Qingseng with a guilty smile. Maybe it's because I stayed up late drawing last night. You. Su Qingsang poked her forehead. I'm not in Lin City, and you're messing around, aren't you? I'm not messing around. Shi Mengwan's smile became more and more stiff when she thought of running into Zhan Haoza again yesterday. Meeting Su Qingsang's concerned eyes, she reached out and hooked her arm. She said half-jokingly, Who told you to abandon me? You're not in Lin City, and I can't even eat. Poor you. Su Qingsang clicked her tongue and patted her on the shoulder. Okay, I'll take you to eat delicious food today. Of course. Shi Mengwan glared at her. You're the wife of the president of Tianyu Group. Aren't you embarrassed to ask me to eat at a roadside stall? There's nothing to be embarrassed about. If you complain again, I'll treat you to spicy hot pot. Spicy hot pot. Speaking of which, the two of them ate quite a lot when they first lived together. Because there was one not far away from them. It was convenient and simple. Okay, I'll eat it if you dare to treat me. After eating, I'll post it on WeChat and Weibo. I want everyone to know how stingy Mrs. Hua is now. Post it. Hurry up. Su Qingsang and Shi Mengwan chatted and laughed. The two of them seemed to have returned to the time when they first lived together. She was too happy to see her good friend, so she didn't notice the flash of worry in Shi Mengwan's eyes. Su Qingsang brought Shi Mengwan home and let her stay in the guest room. Shi Mengwan entered the door and looked at the decoration in front of her. Not bad. This is definitely low-key luxury. It had a minimalist modern style, but one could tell that everything inside was of high quality. She often designed wedding dresses for clients, so she knew about some cutting-edge brands. This house belongs to Hu Jinyao? Then he had good taste. Yes, it's close to his company, and not far from our hospital. So we'll stay here. This apartment only had one floor. However, it connected the two into one. They were the only family on the entire floor. The two families made the room look very big. Not only that, but there was also a huge balcony on the top floor. When they had nothing to do, they could enjoy the scenery from up there. However, Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao didn't have much time. He placed Shi Mengwan's luggage in one of the guest rooms. Fortunately, Su Qingsang had thought that Shi Mengwan would come over, so she had packed everything. Su Qingsang took out the bedsheets and spread them on the bed. Shi Mengwan wanted to do it, but Su Qingsang asked her to sit down and chat with her. Shi Mengwan looked around, but didn't see Xiang Kaiping. She was a little confused. Why didn't I see Auntie? Isn't she living with you? With Xiang Kaiping's personality, why didn't she live with Su Qingsang? Su Qingsang paused in the middle of making the bed. She felt that she couldn't explain it clearly on the phone. Now that she was here, she finally had the time to tell Shi Mengwan about her background. She told Xiang Kaiping about how she and Li Qianxue had reconciled with each other, and how Li Qianxue had accompanied her to Rong City before the Lunar New Year. She told Xiang Kaiping about how she and Li Qianxue had come to Rong City together. Even now, Li Qianxue still video called her almost every day. As for Old Master Li and Su Yusen, they were slowly building a relationship. That's what happened. The bed was already made. Su Qingsang looked at Shi Mengwan, who was dumbfounded and shocked. Finally, she clicked her tongue, stood up, walked to Su Qingsang, and walked around her. Oh my God! Your background is actually so bizarre? Su Qingsang found it unbelievable. I didn't believe it at first. But the paternity test can't be fake. Moreover, only she knew that she was touched, grateful, and protective of Xiang Kaiping. But she didn't have the instinct to get close to her. Shi Mengwan suddenly patted her on the shoulder. Good girl, you knew it during the New Year, didn't you? You didn't tell me? You're not a good friend. Su Qingsang pressed her lips into a straight line and looked a little guilty. I'm sorry. It's not that I didn't tell you on purpose. She didn't know what to say. More importantly, the situation at the time didn't allow for it. You know how my mother, Auntie Xiang, was at that time. Her waist was injured, and she wasn't in good spirits. I was afraid that if you knew, you wouldn't be able to hide your emotions and give yourself away in front of her. So I didn't say it. Besides, she had decided to treat Xiang Kaiping as her own mother. What did it matter whether she said it or not? Shi Mengwan nodded. Although she could control her emotions, it was really a little difficult to guarantee that she wouldn't reveal anything. It must have been hard for you. You hid it for so long. Speaking of which, you stayed with her for so long. Didn't she suspect anything? No. Su Qingsang shook her head. Why would she suspect anything? She felt guilty and uneasy at that time. So she naturally wouldn't think so much. That's true. Thinking of what Xiang Kaiping said in front of her at that time, Shi Mengwan could really understand. Then where's Auntie Xiang now? I didn't ask anymore. Su Qingsang thought of the last time she met Xiang Kaiping. She blamed her for not telling her earlier, and the two of them parted on bad terms. But I heard that Su Peijian has accepted her as her mother and moved in with her. I think she should be slowly building a relationship with Su Peijian. Speaking of which, it was really a very tragic thing. She and Li Qianxue, Xiang Kaiping and Su Peijian, they were mother and daughter, but because of Su Qinghui's actions, they had to rebuild their mother-daughter relationship. They were related by blood, but they couldn't get along like a normal mother and daughter. Shi Mengwan quite likes Xiang Kaiping. Thinking of Su Peijian's personality, she instinctively frowned. With Su Peijian's personality, will she accept Auntie Xiang? Why do I feel that this is so magical? Why not? Su Qingsang didn't think it was strange. After all, she is her biological mother. Moreover, she had her own reasons for abandoning her. Maybe. Shi Mengwan didn't want to talk about conspiracy theories. Anyway, she felt that Su Peijian wasn't the kind of person who would so easily accept a strange woman as her mother. So you and your mother are your biological mother? How is your relationship now? She didn't forget that every time Li Qianxue saw Su Qingsang, she would look at her with disdain. His face was filled with disdain and disregard. Now that she knows that Su Qingsang is her biological daughter, her expression must be very interesting. It was a pity that she didn't get to see it. That's good. She had been busy with work recently. After all, my father left the Li Corporation, and she has to make many decisions. Old Master Li was getting on in years. Li Qianxue couldn't bear to see him work himself to death. Therefore, Li Qianxue was now in charge of the company. Su Yusen didn't live on campus anymore. When he was free, he would go to the company to help out. In any case, his grades were good, and he would not lag behind in his studies. Helping out at the company could be considered as an early internship. Although Li Qianxue didn't need Su Yusen to be so busy, it would be better to have a child to accompany her. Your father is no longer in the Li Corporation? So where is he now? What are you doing? I don't know. Su Qingsang shook her head. She really had no idea. He had heard from Su Yusen that Su Qinghui had visited him a few times and only said some words of concern. He also apologized to Su Yusen for neglecting him in the past. Also asked him to take care of the family. He said that he was about to become an adult, and was an adult. Su Qingsang didn't know if he had visited Li Qianxue, because Li Qianxue seemed to be very reluctant to mention Su Qinghui. She had asked her once. Although Li Qianxue wasn't angry, she could see that her expression wasn't good. Su Qinghui had actually called her once, and the content was also to apologize. To apologize for his decision to replace the child. Unlike Li Qianxue, Su Qingsang didn't blame Su Qinghui too much. In fact, she was more willing to believe that Su Qinghui was impulsive back then. Even if he had done it on purpose, things had already turned out this way. She also didn't want to let herself fall into the mood of being responsible, and didn't want to blame him. After that, Su Qinghui never contacted her again. She did take the initiative to call Su Qinghui twice, but the father and daughter didn't have much affection before, so they didn't know what to say when they really called. They just said a few greetings, and then hung up. Su Qinghui cared about her situation in Rong City, and told her to take good care of herself. It had been half a month since the last call. Therefore Su Qingsang didn't know where Su Qinghui was, and what he was doing. He probably doesn't want others to see him like this. After all, Su Qinghui's current state shouldn't be too good. Not only did he leave the Li Corporation, but he also divorced Li Qianxue. More importantly, after the divorce, he realized that he actually had feelings for Li Qianxue. It was really quite ironic. When he had it, he didn't know how to cherish it. When he lost it, he wanted to get it back, but found that there was no chance. Shi Mengwan thought of the few times she had interacted with Su Qinghui in the past, and felt a little emotional. Did your mother really divorce him just like that? Yes. Su Qingsang actually didn't want to believe it, but Li Qianxue was such a proud person. She probably really didn't want to look back. During this period of time, she could actually see the hidden fatigue in Li Qianxue's eyes. Although she had been the president of the Li Corporation for so many years, many things were Su Qinghui who took the initiative to help her bear the responsibility. In addition to the previous cooperation between the Li Corporation and Tianyu Group, Li Qianxue had been very busy recently. Sometimes when she video called her at night, she was still in the office dealing with business. Su Qingsang actually felt a little sorry. She wanted to persuade Li Qianxue that even if they divorced, she could let Su Qinghui continue to work in the Li Corporation. However, thinking of Li Qianxue's personality, she didn't say that suggestion in the end. She wanted to say a few words, but Li Qianxue obviously didn't want to. Chapter 501. Let's not talk about them. Let's go out for dinner. Su Qingsang took out her phone and called Hu Jinyao to ask if he was done with work. If not, they could have dinner together. Hu Jinyao had a business meeting that night. She hung up the phone and smiled at Shi Mingwan. There's no other way. It's just the two of us tonight. Hu Jinyao has been very busy recently. He seems to have a lot of things to do in the company. But don't worry. He'll treat you to a big meal tomorrow. Shi Mingwan put her arm around Su Qingsang's arm. What? Are you afraid that I'll be unhappy? It's better without Hu Jinyao. The two of us can have a good talk. After telling Ms. Yu that she didn't have to cook that day, Su Qingsang took Shi Mingwan to the restaurant closest to her house. This is the property of a friend of Hu Jinyao. The dishes here are very special, and the name is nice. Although there were only two of them, when Su Qingsang showed her gold card, the waiter immediately took her upstairs to a private room specially prepared for the VIPs. Sure. Mrs. Hua. Shi Mingwan took a step back and looked at Su Qingsang. Have you noticed that ever since you started dating Hu Jinyao, you've become more and more like a rich lady? Nonsense again. Haven't I always been like this? She rarely came to places like this. She usually came with Hu Jinyao. But Hu Jinyao's friends were nice. This restaurant was the property of Wan Xianyang's family. He was the one who gave her the gold card. The two of them were taken upstairs by the waiter. Su Qingsang asked Shi Mingwan and ordered a few signature dishes. While waiting for the dishes to be served, they talked about each other's recent situations. Su Qingsang didn't have much to say. Hospital home. Speaking of which, ever since Lu Tongjia had a disagreement with her, she had been summoned back to the Hua family twice by Old Master Hua. He Xianyao was there both times. But Old Master Hua was there, so He Xianyao only went to visit Old Master Hua as a junior. After dinner, she didn't stay long and left. During that time, Lu Tongjia kept praising how considerate and polite He Xianyao was. Not only did she visit her often, but she also went shopping with her. Last time, she also went with her to the Women's Chamber of Commerce. The Women's Chamber of Commerce in Rong City was actually founded by the wives of the well-known families in the business world. Usually he would do some charity work. On one hand, she was helping others. On the other hand, she was promoting her husband's company. Xianyao might have done it. Speaking of which, she has helped a lot with the company's business. Whoever marries her in the future will marry a good wife. Even though Old Master Hua was there, Lu Tongjia didn't mind praising He Xianyao. The others could tell that Lu Tongjia was unhappy with Su Qingsang. However, Su Qingsang pretended that she didn't notice it. She continued to act as normal with Hu Jinyao. For the second time, Lu Tongjia praised He Xianyao to the heavens and said that it was a pity that such a good daughter-in-law didn't marry into the Hua family. Hu Jinyao glanced at the Hua brothers, who were also present. Yes, Mom. Fertile water should not flow to outsiders. Since you think Miss He is so good, why don't you let Yifan or Yang be with her? She's married into the Hua family. Lu Tongjia's and Hua Yifan's expressions changed at that simple sentence. He Xianyao liked Hu Jinyao. Not only did he not appreciate it, but he also wanted her to be with the Hua brothers. Didn't he mean that he wanted Hua Yifan to marry someone he didn't like? Lu Tongjia was even angrier. Her son didn't give her any face. She wanted to lose her temper, but Xianyao couldn't stay. No matter how thick-skinned she was, she couldn't stand being kicked around like a ball. She ran away before the meal was finished. After she left, no matter how unhappy Hu Yifan and Lu Tongjia were, they couldn't do anything. After that, Su Qingseng felt peaceful. At least, Lu Tongjia didn't call to ask them to go home for dinner. Su Qingseng and Hu Jinyao could handle these things themselves. So Su Qingseng didn't think it was necessary to tell Shi Mengwan. I'm fine, but you? Su Qingseng looked at the faint shadow under Shi Mengwan's eyes. Although I'm not in Lin City, don't work too hard. That was your own studio to begin with. It doesn't matter if you have more or less jobs. Don't risk your life for money. No, I didn't. I just took 2 more jobs after the design competition. Don't worry. I'll be relieved after this. Shi Mengwan lowered her head and used the act of drinking water to hide her guilty conscience. Su Qingseng had been her good friend for many years. If Shi Mengwan acted the slightest bit weird, Shi Mengwan would easily notice. Mengwan, why don't you come to Rong City to develop your career? Su Qingseng suggested seriously. You see, you have a studio anyway. It's the same wherever you go. If you come to Rong City, we'll have company again. What do you think? No. Shi Mengwan refused without thinking. I already have a foundation in Lin City. I don't want to leave it behind. Why do you want to leave it behind? Make it the headquarters and open a branch here. As for the business, you don't have to worry about it. With Hu Jinyao's connections, your studio will definitely be successful. She believed that Hu Jinyao would be very willing to help. No need. Rely on your Hu Jinyao. I don't want to. Moreover, even though Lin City wasn't my original home, it was still very close to my home no matter what. I think it'll be convenient for me to go home to see my parents. If I come to Rong City, it'll be inconvenient for me to go home to see my parents. Shi Mengwan's home was in another city not far from Lin City. There was no airport there. Shi Mengwan usually went home to see her parents by train or car. Occasionally she drove herself. If she really came to Rong City, it would be inconvenient for her to go home to see her parents. It's fine if you don't come, but you have to promise me. Take good care of yourself. Don't worry. I will. Shi Mengwan was too embarrassed to say that she didn't look very well these days because of Zhang Haoze, and it had nothing to do with her staying up late to draw pictures. Su Qingseng was really worried when she said that. Shi Mengwan used to draw day and night. In the past, she lived close to Lin City, so she always had time to keep an eye on her. Now she was really worried. Thinking about it, she suddenly had a suggestion. Speaking of which, since you're here, why don't I ask Hu Jinyao to take you to meet his childhood friends next time? I think they're all good people. They're all elites. Do you want to pick one of them? Su Qingseng was willing to believe that Zhang Haoze, whom Shi Mengwan had met before, was her big brother. But he already had a fiancée. Shi Mengwan really wanted to wait for him for the rest of her life. Su Qingseng felt wronged for her. Shi Mengwan's appearance and figure were both excellent. Even if her family background wasn't the best, she had opened her own studio, and the business was good. Her reputation was also slowly building. It would be a pity to spend the rest of her life with that completely impossible person. We'll see. Shi Mengwan didn't want to talk about it. I don't want to get married now. Who asked you to get married? I'm asking you to fall in love. It's okay to enjoy love, right? Even if you don't think it's suitable in the future, you can break up. If it were anyone else, Su Qingseng wouldn't have persuaded her like this. But seeing Shi Mengwan wait for her big brother year after year, who knew where he had forgotten her, she really felt that it wasn't worth it. All right. You don't have to worry about my business. You can just live a good life with Hu Jinyao. She didn't want to mention it, so Su Qingseng didn't say it. She and Hu Jinyao had been very close recently. They were almost as sweet as honey. Naturally, she also hoped that her best friend could be happy. Shi Mengwan was still thinking about how to change the topic away from herself when her phone rang. She took it out and glanced at it. The word enemy on it made her look a little uncomfortable all of a sudden. I'm going out to take a call. Shi Mengwan took her phone and walked out. She didn't know why Zhang Haoze called her. She clenched her phone tightly and turned off the sound. She walked out of the private room and didn't decide whether she should answer it or not. If she answered it, what would she say? While she was still struggling, the phone had already been hung up. Sure, Mengwan was a little surprised, but it seemed to be expected. Leaning against the wall, she held her phone and leaned against the wall, unable to come back to her senses for a long time. Just as she was about to go back to the private room, her phone rang again. Thinking it was still Jean Hausa, Sure Mengwan picked it up without looking. Unexpectedly, it was a call from the studio. Her face was full of disappointment. After talking about the main topic, she looked at the phone screen that had gone dark. She let out a long sigh and didn't return Jean Hausa's call. She walked towards the private room, but saw a woman in front of her coming out of the elevator and entering one of the private rooms. That figure looked like Su Peijian. Sure Mengwan blinked. Before she could see clearly, the other party had already entered the room. She was slightly nearsighted, so for a moment, she wasn't even sure if it was really her or if she was seeing things. She looked again and found that not long after, another man followed her into the room. Sure Mengwan watched for a while longer and finally believed that she might have seen things wrong. Su Peijian should still be in Lin City at this time, right? How could she be in Rong City? Besides, why did she come to Rong City? Shaking her head, Sure Mengwan didn't take this matter to heart. If the person who saw that figure just now was Su Qingsang, then she would know that the person sitting only 3 private rooms away from them was Su Peijian. At the Hua family, Lu Tongjia sat on the sofa in the room and looked at Hua Mingguang, who was reading a book. Her face was obviously dissatisfied. What do you mean? As the current chairman of Tianyu Group, is it so difficult for you to arrange for someone to enter the company? Tongjia. Hua Mingguang put the book in his hand aside and said, "It's not that it's difficult for me to arrange for someone, but you have to arrange for this person to be by Jinyao's side. Jinyao's people were all chosen by himself. He may not use the people I give him." Chapter 502. Jinyao chooses his own secretaries. Even if I send them to him, he might not use them. He has more than one secretary. Besides, I remember that Zhang Yang's wife is going to have a baby. He seems to be planning to take a leave of absence. Don't think that I don't know. When I went to the company last time, I happened to hear it. Jinyao had more than one secretary, but Zhang Yang was the one he relied on the most. He had been with him for several years. Other than him, Yang Wenchang, his assistant, took care of everything. She didn't even want the position of an assistant. She just wanted a secretary, and it wasn't a particularly important position. Why couldn't she get it? Hua Mingguang looked at Lu Tongjia and felt a little helpless. He knew what his wife was thinking. Tongjia, Jinyao is already married. Why do you? What did I do? Lu Tongjia looked at Hua Mingguang. She didn't think she did anything wrong. What did I do? I did it for his own good. Only Hua Jinyao would treat such a woman like a treasure. Hua Mingguang didn't know what to say. He didn't have a problem with Su Qingsang. To Jinyao, no matter what, Hua Jinyao was his son. Even if he couldn't get over it, he wouldn't be as angry as Lu Tongjia. I don't care. I don't care how you do it. Anyway, I'll leave it to you. You don't have to be so angry. I'll ask someone to arrange it tomorrow. Is that okay? Lu Tongjia finally looked a little better, but there was still a hint of worry on her face. Hua Mingguang got up, walked to Lu Tongjia, and put his arm around her shoulder. I won't try to persuade you. I'm just afraid that Jinyao will be dissatisfied with you in the end. By then, he'll be dissatisfied with me. Lu Tongjia sneered. I don't need him to be satisfied with me. Which one of the things he has done has satisfied me? None, not a single one. If he doesn't satisfy me, why should I satisfy him? Am I his mother? Or is he my mother? Hua Mingguang didn't say anything. He just patted her shoulder. Lu Tongjia was depressed. She leaned her face against his chest. Mingguang, do you think I'm being unreasonable? The last time she brought He Xinyao home, old Master Hua was very dissatisfied with her and looked very angry. Later, she didn't forget to tell Hua Mingguang in private to restrain herself. Restrain? Why did she have to restrain herself? Hua Jinyao didn't restrain himself at all. She hated the old man for being so biased. It was clear that Hua Jinyao had made such a big mistake. It was clear that he had wronged everyone in the family. How could old Master Hu let him off lightly? No. Hua Mingguang had been married to Lu Tongjia for more than 30 years. They had gone through ups and downs together, so he knew her very well. He knew the pain in her heart, and he also knew the difficulty in her heart. Mingguang, to tell you the truth, I really don't want to see my grandson come out of the womb of a woman like Su Qingsang. He was full of schemes and tricks. You didn't see the way she talked to me before. I really don't like her. Of course, she would not admit that she disliked Hu Jinniao even more. Because she didn't like Hu Jinniao, she was very critical of Su Qingsang. Hua Mingguang understood. Alright, don't think too much about it. I'll arrange the people for you. As for what happens next, it's not my business. Okay. Lu Tongjia nodded and looked up at Hua Mingguang. Her eyes were a little red. Mingguang, thank you. Hua Mingguang was silent and sighed in his heart. After so many years, he also had a grudge against Hu Jinniao, so he let Lu Tongjia do whatever she wanted. However, thinking of how much Hu Jinniao cared for Su Qingsang, Hua Mingguang suddenly had a vague premonition. This time, Lu Tongjia probably wouldn't get what she wanted. Shi Mengwan looked at the antique door in front of her and looked a little impressed. The environment here is really good. How did you find out? I don't need to find out. Su Qingsang glanced at her and shook the gold card in her hand. Hu Jinniao told me yesterday. He said that this place is good. It's just the right season to come here. It was Friday, and Hu Jinniao had to go to work. He couldn't accompany them. More importantly, he knew that Su Qingsang wanted to have a good time with Shi Mengwan and her two good friends. President Hua is quite a good person. Shi Mengwan gave her an ambiguous look. But you really don't have to ask for leave to accompany me. It's not like I haven't traveled alone before. That's different. You came all the way here. I have to be a good host. Su Qingsang took her hand and said, let's go. Speaking of which, it's all thanks to you. After all, it's my first time here. If it weren't for the GPS and Hu Jinniao telling her the place yesterday, she might not have been able to find it. Just say that you wanted to come out and have fun. So you used me as an excuse. Shi Mengwan joked with Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang nodded repeatedly. Wow, you saw through me? I'm going to kill you. As she spoke, she reached out her hand and was about to strangle her. Shi Mengwan laughed and dodged it. After a while, the two of them entered the door together. This time, Su Qingsang brought Shi Mengwan here to go to the hot spring. This place was a gift from a client who had worked with Hu Jinniao. After that person gave the gold card to Hu Jinniao, he had only brought a few of his childhood friends here twice. This time, when Shi Mengwan came, he thought of this place. All the buildings were designed to imitate the Suzhou Gardens and looked antique. However, the privacy inside was very good, like the Japanese hot spring hotels. Each hot spring was separated by a small space. This place is really nice. Su Qingsang looked at the environment in front of her. It looks even bigger than the hot spring hotel I went to in Japan. And the environment is even better. It's not bad. Shi Mengwan also nodded, her face full of admiration. Let's go. Let's enjoy ourselves today. I heard that there's a spa next door. We can go there after we finish the hot spring. Then what are we waiting for? I can't wait. Su Qingsang and Shi Mengwan first took a good look around the club. Although it was already winter, she didn't know what method the people in the club used. There were a lot of green plants that she didn't know the names of, and there were even plum blossoms. Wow! Shi Mengwan couldn't help but exclaim. Why are the plum blossoms blooming at this time? Shouldn't it have bloomed already? Almost. Look, the flowering period is almost over. We're in luck. Some of the plum blossoms were about to wither, but it still didn't affect the two of them. It's really good. Shi Mengwan hugged Su Qingsang. Qingsang, I'm very satisfied with today's arrangement. Don't worry, it'll make you even more satisfied. It was Friday. Su Qingsang had time to accompany her tomorrow, and the day after. In the evening, Su Qingsang and Shi Mengwan went to the spa first, then went to the hot spring in the small room. The hot spring water was brought into the room from outside, and then the room was directly turned into a small hot spring pool. Although it was called a small pool, it was actually very big. It could accommodate 7 or 8 people to go into the pool together. Because of the hot spring, Su Qingsang and Shi Mingwan only wore swimsuits and went into the water. The two of them soaked for a while, and Shi Mingwan heard the phone on the small table on the shore ring. The ringtone was specially set by her, and she knew it was Zhang Haozi. She was stunned for a moment, and she didn't move in the hot spring. Su Qingsang was on the other side of the hot spring pool. Hearing the ringtone, she turned to look at her. "Your phone is ringing. Do you want me to get it for you?" "No need." She had marked Zhang Haozi's name as enemy. With Su Qingsang's sharp senses, she would definitely find something wrong. "I'll do it myself." Shi Mingwan got up to get the phone. After getting the phone, she looked at the number on it for a few seconds, and finally put on the bathrobe prepared by the club. "Qingsang, I'll go out to take a call." "Okay." Su Qingsang waved her hand and didn't think much about it. Shi Mingwan took the phone and went out, while she continued to soak in the hot spring. Not long after, she heard light footsteps, and then the sound of the door being opened. When Shi Mingwan went out, she was in a hurry and didn't close the door, but just left it unlocked. Now that the door was opened and closed, Su Qingsang thought it was Shi Mingwan coming back. "Are you done with the call?" "What call? Why did you go outside, uncle?" Looking at the person who suddenly appeared in front of her, Su Qingsang was stunned. She wanted to scream, but at the same time, she restrained herself. Then almost instinctively, she shrank her body into the hot spring. Zhang Yichen didn't expect to see Su Qingsang here. Although it was misty in the hot spring, he could still see her clearly at a glance. The bikini that Su Qingsang was wearing, and he quickly turned around, so that he wouldn't take another look. "Sorry." He saw that the door was unlocked, so he thought that there was no one inside. "You." Su Qingsang wanted to say something, but at that moment, there was another flurry of footsteps outside. Zhang Yichen's expression changed, and he looked around. Although they were called small rooms, they weren't small at all. In addition to the hot spring, there was an inner room with a bed and a bathroom. On the side, there were cabinets for customers to hang their clothes. Zhang Yichen glanced at Su Qingsang, then glanced around the room. At last, he dashed into the closet where the clothes were hung. Before he went in, he glanced at Su Qingsang. He didn't say anything, but the meaning of his eyes and movement was obvious. Seeing his series of actions, Su Qingsang didn't know how to react for a moment. She heard the footsteps coming closer and closer, and then she seemed to hear someone arguing in the next room. Someone must have disturbed them. Soon, someone knocked on the door of her room. Chapter 503. After standing there for a few seconds, Su Qingsang opened the door. There were several people standing outside. Seeing her open the door, they seemed to be about to rush in. Su Qingsang quickly stood in front of them, looking at the behavior of these people in front of her. "Who are you?" Su Qingsang didn't let those people in. She glanced around. There were at least 5 people standing in front of her, all wearing black suits. She could also hear the protesting voices of the guests on the other side of the corridor. Obviously, they were dissatisfied with their behavior. The hot spring was very warm inside, but the wind in the corridor was a little cold. Su Qingsang tightened her bathrobe and looked at the people in front of her with a guarded expression. "What do you want?" The man in the lead took a step forward when he saw Su Qingsang. "Sorry, our boss just lost a dog. We came to look for it." "There is no dog here." Su Qingsang frowned because of what he said. "Dog? Was he talking about Zhang Yichen?" "Yes or no, let us go in and have a look." "Sir, I'm here to spend money. You came into my room casually and disturbed me while I was enjoying the hot spring. Can I complain to your boss?" "I'm sorry, boss. The lost dog is very valuable. We must find it." As the man spoke, he raised his hand and was about to let the people behind him rush in. How could Su Qingsang let them in? She stood in front of them and said, "I advise you to think about it carefully. I'm not someone you can mess with. Do you know who I am?" The man in the lead had a mustache. Hearing that, he stopped rushing in and took a step back, looking Su Qingsang up and down. Su Qingsang was wearing a bathrobe, and her hair was tied up on top of her head. The man couldn't recognize her just like that. Su Qingsang stared at the man and said, I am the wife of Hu Jinyao, the president of Tianyu Group. Aren't you afraid that my husband will be unhappy if you rush in like this? The man with the mustache narrowed his eyes and looked at Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang didn't hesitate and took a big step back. Come on, you want to find a dog, right? Come in and find it. But I'm here to spend money. My husband gave me the card. He was also the one who told me to relax here. If you insist on coming in to look for it, I won't object. However, if you don't find the dog and cause me trouble, then I really don't mind telling my husband that this is how you treat your VIP customers. The mustache man still wanted to say something, but the person standing behind him took a step forward and said something to the mustache man. The man with the mustache stood there and stared at Su Qingsang. He didn't make any move to rush in, but he still had to say, "We're just looking for a dog. Madam, please let us go in and take a look." I said there are no dogs here. I'm a big man. How could I not know if a dog came in or not? Or could it be that you're doing this on purpose to make me unhappy? When she said this, the manager of the club also came over. He obviously knew that Su Qingsang was here with the limited VIP gold card. When he saw Su Qingsang, he nodded vigorously with an apologetic smile on his face. Sorry, Mrs. Hua, your subordinates are immature. They're not targeting you. It's just that this dog is really my boss's beloved pet, so we must find it. Please do my boss a favor and let my people in to take a look. Just one look. Don't worry. We promise not to disturb you. Su Qingsang stood still, obviously not intending to move away. The manager could only go further. Mrs. Hua, don't worry. Our boss and Mr. Hua also know each other. They are both people in the business circle of Rong City. I believe that even if Mr. Hua was here, he would give our boss face. Why don't you let us disturb you for a few minutes? Hearing what the manager said, Su Qingsang smiled and said, Okay. Just a few minutes, right? It's okay. Come in and look for it. As she spoke, she took 2 steps into the room, and then stood in front of the wardrobe casually. Go ahead. The club manager glanced at the mustache man. He came in with a few people to take a look around. The room was so big that it was easy to see if there was anyone hiding in it. The man stepped back and looked at Su Qingsang's position. Behind her was the wardrobe. The mustache man obviously wanted to look at the wardrobe. Su Qingsang smiled when she met his eyes. Sir, do you still want to search the wardrobe? Why? Do you suspect that your dog can run in by itself? Come and find. As she spoke, she pretended to pull the door of the wardrobe. The mustache man cleared his throat. No need. Sorry to disturb you. The club manager also nodded vigorously. Sorry to disturb you, Mrs. Hua. We will go to Mr. Hua's place to apologize another day. No need to apologize. Su Qingsang crossed her arms in front of her chest. I came here to relax. To put it bluntly, I came here to enjoy myself. Since you know that I disturbed you, why don't you leave? What? You don't want me to stay here anymore, do you? Is this how you do business? Sorry, we will leave now. We are really sorry to disturb you, Mrs. Hua. Please understand. As the club manager spoke, the mustache man was still staring at the wardrobe behind Su Qingsang. It was obvious that he wanted to open the wardrobe and search it again. His gaze made Su Qingsang even angrier. She took a step forward, her face full of anger for being disturbed. After the manager repeatedly apologized and said that all of Su Qingsang's expenses that day were free, he left with the mustache man and the others. Su Qingsang didn't relax because they were leaving. Instead, she kept standing in front of the wardrobe. Her face was always in an unhappy state, which made the man with the mustache turn around and look at her for the last time before he left without any more doubts. Su Qingsang looked casual, but only she knew how stiff she was and how nervous she was. When the last person left, she slowly walked up and closed the door. As soon as the door was closed, she leaned against the door and didn't move. Only she felt a layer of cold sweat on her back. Just now, she was really worried that the mustache man wouldn't give up and would insist on opening the wardrobe. She waited for a while to make sure that the sound outside was far away, then went forward and opened the wardrobe. Zhang Yichen walked out of the wardrobe. Thank you. You're welcome. Su Qingsang shook her head and looked at Zhang Yichen's clothes. He was also wearing black. They were looking for you just now. Yes. Can I ask, what did you do? Su Qingsang asked, then realized that she didn't ask. With Zhang Yichen's status, he couldn't say anything. Nothing. I took something from their boss. Zhang Yichen didn't say anything. Su Qingsang didn't ask anymore. The people outside the door hadn't left yet. And Zhang Yichen couldn't just leave like that. Looking at Su Qingsang, who seemed to be a little embarrassed, he thanked her very sincerely. You're welcome. Su Qingsang had already calmed down. She believed that if those people wanted to come back, they wouldn't do it now. I should thank you. You gave me a chance to use my identity to pressure people. Whether it was in Lin City or Rong City now, this was the first time she used her identity to pressure people. It was interesting to think about it. Zhang Yichen looked at her. This woman was undoubtedly very smart. She had predicted all the possible reactions of those people. I think Hua Jinyao won't mind you using his identity to pressure people. Of course. He might be more than happy to do so. Thinking of Hua Jinyao, Su Qingsang's lips turned up into a faint smile. If Hua Jinyao found out about what happened today, he might even help her vent her anger again. That guy hated it when people bullied her. When she thought of Hua Jinyao, her eyes softened. Her face, which was originally only 7 points, instantly turned into 10 points. Zhang Yichen looked at her face. For a moment he couldn't move his eyes away. Sensing his gaze, Su Qingsang's smile immediately disappeared. She took a step back uncomfortably. How are you going to leave later? Why do I remember that they have surveillance cameras? My colleague broke the surveillance cameras. The time limit was 15 minutes. It had been 10 minutes since he came in. Speaking of which, he should leave now. But they are looking for you all over the world. I don't think it's easy for you to leave, right? Su Qingsang didn't want to be nosy. However, since he was here now, she might as well ask him something. After all, he was Hua Jinyao's uncle. It's okay. I have a way. While speaking, Zhang Yichen tried to keep his eyes on Su Qingsang's face. The bathrobe she was wearing was a little too big. Even though she pulled it tight, her delicate collarbones could still be seen. Also, she crossed her arms in front of her chest, which made her figure stand out. She had just been in the hot spring. Because of that, her skin looked beautiful and pink. She was as beautiful as a lotus flower that had just emerged from the water. Zhang Yichen couldn't help but think of Su Qingsang in the hot spring. Her shoulders were smooth, and her skin was smooth. It turned out that the beauties in the books were real people in reality. Zhang Yichen clenched his hands and forced himself to look away. Su Qingsang didn't ask any more questions. Since Zhang Yichen said he had a way, she didn't need to worry about it. The two of them didn't say anything. They just stood there facing each other. The silence was a little awkward. Realizing the situation in front of her, Su Qingsang took a step back, wondering why Shi Mengwan hadn't shown up yet. Zhang Yichen's jaw tightened when he saw what she was doing. He tried his best to ignore her evasive attitude. He told himself that she was married and was his niece's wife. Are you in the hot spring alone? Zhang Yichen saw the door open. He thought it was an empty room, so he rushed in. He thought he could find a chance to hide. Chapter 504. Su Qingsang shook her head and said, No, I came with a friend. After that, they didn't say anything else. Su Qingsang was wearing a bathrobe, but her clothes were disheveled. She felt very uncomfortable, thinking about how to end the situation. Zhang Yichen frowned at the awkwardness on her face. He was about to say something when someone knocked on the door. Su Qingsang and Zhang Yichen looked at the door at the same time. They both thought that the other person had returned. Zhang Yichen glanced around. He couldn't hide in the wardrobe anymore. There was a small window in the bathroom, but he couldn't get through it. Su Qingsang looked anxious as well. Under such circumstances, where could Zhang Yichen hide? Zhang Yichen was about to go to the bathroom when Su Qingsang heard Shi Mengwan's voice. Why did you lock the door? I didn't lock it just now. Su Qingsang was relieved to hear Shi Mengwan's voice. She glanced at Zhang Yichen to tell him that it was okay. She turned to open the door for Shi Mengwan. As soon as the door was opened, she pulled Shi Mengwan in. She moved so fast that Shi Mengwan didn't have time to react. Qingsang, you. Shi Mingwan saw Zhang Yichen when the door was closed. She gasped, then turned to Su Qingseng with her eyes wide open. This is Hua Jinyao's uncle Zhang Yichen. Su Qingseng pointed at Shi Mingwan. This is Shi Mingwan, my friend. Nice to meet you. Zhang Yichen was quite calm. He greeted Shi Mingwan like this. Nice to meet you. Shi Mingwan blinked and looked at Su Qingseng without saying a word. Nothing. I just happened to meet him. Hua Jinyao didn't allow Su Qingseng to tell Shi Mingwan what Zhang Yichen had done. Surprisingly, Shi Mingwan didn't want to keep asking. Su Qingseng also forgot to ask Shi Mingwan why she took so long to make a phone call. Normally, she would have noticed that something was wrong with Shi Mingwan. With Zhang Yichen there, Su Qingseng and Shi Mingwan didn't want to go into the bathroom again. The two of them had just started bathing and wanted to stay a little longer. Su Qingseng looked at Zhang Yichen, then at Shi Mingwan. Mingwan, shall we go back to our room and get some rest? Sure. Although they all wore swimsuits when they soaked in the hot spring, it was really embarrassing to have such a big man standing next to them. Then both of them looked at Zhang Yichen. The hot spring room and their room were on opposite sides of the club. If they wanted to go back, they had to go through a corridor and then a small courtyard. If they left now, what would happen to Zhang Yichen? Zhang Yichen glanced at Su Qingseng, then went to the bathroom. The window was so small that no one could climb out of it. He was in too much of a hurry just now and forgot to look for the way. He looked around and suddenly had an idea. Don't worry about me. If you want to leave, then leave. Zhang Yichen stood there without moving. Su Qingseng glanced at him and finally believed that he would handle it well. Shi Mingwan was a little confused, but she didn't ask further. The two of them brought their clothes into the small room and quickly changed. Su Qingseng was still thinking about how Zhang Yichen would leave later. However, when they came out, Zhang Yichen was already gone. Su Qingseng and Shi Mingwan looked at each other. They didn't hear the door open. They didn't know where Zhang Yichen was. Since Zhang Yichen wasn't here, the two of them went back to their own things. They changed again and went back to the hot spring. This time, those people didn't come looking for them. Zhang Yichen didn't come back either. The two of them could quietly soak in the hot spring. Shi Mingwan was soaking in the hot spring, enjoying the steam. She couldn't help but ask curiously, "What kind of uncle is this? He looks so young. He looks like he's in his 30s at most. He's the son of Hua Jinyao's great-aunt. His great-aunt wasn't young when she gave birth to him, so he's about the same age as Hua Jinyao." I see. Shi Mingwan nodded. He's quite handsome. You like him? How about I introduce him to you? No need. Shi Mingwan thought of her phone call with Zhang Haoze. The two of them didn't say a word. They just stayed silent. He didn't speak, so she didn't know what to say. She should have hung up the phone, but she didn't want to. Not only did she not want to, but she also felt that listening to Zhang Haoze's breathing was also very calming and reassuring. Therefore, although they talked on the phone for a long time, they didn't really talk much. Even so, Shi Mingwan only believed in Zhang Haoze. As for other men, she really didn't want to talk about them. Su Qingseng knew that even if she didn't say it, so she didn't ask. After soaking in the hot spring, they rested in the room of the club for the night. When they got up the next morning, the manager of the club brought them breakfast. He apologized again and again for disturbing them the day before. Su Qingseng wasn't a person who wouldn't let others off easily. The other party showed enough sincerity, so she wouldn't make things difficult for them. However, she still had to pretend that she was letting him off lightly for Hua Jinyao's sake. In fact, she was more or less curious. Where on earth had Zhang Yichen been hiding? After all, the other party had sent so many people to look for him, but he disappeared just like that. Thinking about it, it was really impressive. After all, when they went back to their room yesterday, they also observed that there was no more noise. And then they couldn't even hear the sound. That meant that Zhang Yichen must have left safely. After leaving the club and getting into the car, Shi Mingwan patted Su Qingseng on the shoulder and said, "You're good. You're becoming more and more like a rich lady." She was talking about how Su Qingseng coincidentally ran into the man with a mustache in the yard last night when she left the club. Shi Mingwan was hiding to make a phone call, so she naturally didn't know who the man with the mustache was. But Su Qingsang knew. She looked at the man with the cold face. Although there was no dissatisfaction in her eyes, her expression was definitely not good. It seemed that the man with the mustache didn't find Zhang Yichen. His expression didn't change, but she could faintly see the anxiety in his eyes. "Thank you for the compliment." Su Qingsang didn't want to be like this, but she had to keep acting, so that those people wouldn't think about what happened yesterday. More importantly, Zhang Yichen should have passed the test safely. In fact, she believed that even if she wasn't there, Zhang Yichen should have passed the test safely. Su Qingsang didn't want to think about it anymore. She had made up her mind to tell Hu Jinyao some time. She couldn't have a third. She had met Zhang Yichen a few times in private. Although they didn't do anything, she still wanted Hu Jinyao to know. Su Qingsang had been in Rong City for a long time, but she hadn't been to many places. She wanted to focus on keeping Shi Mingwan company for the rest of the time. Hu Jinyao knew that she was keeping Shi Mingwan company, but Lu Tongjia didn't know that. Seeing that Su Qingsang didn't even come back for the weekend, Lu Tongjia naturally thought that she was dissatisfied with her. That made her even more determined to carry out her plan. She had made a backup plan. This time, she didn't believe that Su Qingsang could survive it. On Saturday, Hu Jinyao was finally free. He took Su Qingsang and Shi Mingwan to play in Rong City for a day. In the evening, he took Su Qingsang and Shi Mingwan to have dinner with his childhood friends. He also introduced Shi Mingwan to Wan Xianying and the others. Except for Li Junsheng, who was still in Lin City, the others were all there. Li Junsheng didn't come, but Li Wanyu did. She didn't know what Hu Jinyao said to her last time, but she was much more friendly to Su Qingsang today. For Su Qingsang, this was a good thing. Because there were so many people, it was inevitable that it was a little noisy. Su Qingsang couldn't tell Hu Jinyao about what had happened at the club yesterday. However, there was something else that happened at the party that caught her attention. That was, Wan Xianying seemed to be interested in Shi Mingwan. When Shi Mingwan entered the door with him, Wan Xianying stared at her for a long time. After they sat down, he looked in Shi Mingwan's direction from time to time with obvious interest in his eyes. During dinner, he sat next to Shi Mingwan on purpose. Later, when everyone went to the club under their name, Wan Xianying didn't forget to sit next to Shi Mingwan. He asked her to eat and play. He really made his presence known in front of her. Shi Mingwan knew that these people were Hu Jinyao's friends, so she didn't disrespect them. Even when Wan Xianying said that he wanted to sing a song with her, she stood up and sang with him. Su Qingsang had always known that Shi Mingwan had a good voice. When her voice came out, Tang Mohan and Cheng Xianyan couldn't help but look at her, not to mention Wan Xianying. Su Qingsang could see that Shi Mingwan had to socialize with Wan Xianying. However, Wan Xianying obviously took it to heart. She could naturally trust Hu Jinyao's friends. If Shi Mingwan could really have something with Wan Xianying, she thought it would be a good thing. However, looking at Shi Mingwan, she clearly didn't see Wan Xianying as a man who was interested in her. She only saw him as Hu Jinyao's childhood friend. It seemed that there was no possibility between the two of them. But overall, this day's gathering was a joyous one for both the host and the guests. The group of people didn't go home until very late. When they got home, Shi Mingwan was also tired. She didn't intend to be a third wheel to Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao. As soon as she entered the door, she said goodbye and went back to her room to rest. After returning to her room and taking a shower, Su Qingsang took out the hairdryer to dry her hair. Hu Jinyao took the initiative to come over and take the hairdryer from her hand to help her. It wasn't the first time he had done this, so he was very skilled. His big hand stroked Su Qingsang's scalp. She felt very comfortable and even narrowed her eyes. Chapter 505. Su Qingsang opened her eyes and looked at Hu Jinyao through the mirror on the dresser. Hu Jinyao didn't want to be nosy, but before they parted, Wan Xianying had come to him in private and asked him to ask Su Qingsang what Shi Mingwan thought of him. He had heard about Wan Xianying's relationship before, but it had been more than a year since he broke up with his last girlfriend. It was rare for him to be interested in a woman, and she was Su Qingsang's friend, So Hu Jinyao didn't mind talking to her. I don't think so. Su Qingseng knew Shi Mingwan best. She has someone she likes. She won't be with Wan Zianying. Wan Zianying wasn't bad looking. He wasn't as handsome as Hu Jinyao, nor was he as masculine as Zhang Yichen. However, he looked fair, gentle and clean. He was the kind of fresh meat that people admired nowadays. But she knew that he wasn't Shi Mingwan's type. She has such high standards. Wan Zianying's family was not bad. Most importantly, Wan Zianying's aunt had wanted Wan Zianying to marry for a long time. If they were really interested in each other, Hu Jinyao thought it would be a good thing. After all, Shi Mingwan was a nice person. Even though she always tried to steal his wife. It's not that she has high standards. Su Qingseng thought about it, and decided to tell Hu Jinyao. Mingwan likes someone like Zhang Haoze. Don't try to pull strings. Zhang Haoze. Of course Hu Jinyao knew Zhang Haoze. They had met before. Thinking about Zhang Haoze, Hu Jinyao frowned. Zhang Haoze is engaged, right? Yes. So they have no chance. But even if they had no chance, Shi Mingwan wouldn't change her mind to like someone else. Since they have no chance, let's try with Zianying. Zianying is a nice person, and he's not a playboy. Compared with other people in Rong City, he's clean and honest. By other people, Hu Jinyao was referring to his cousin Lu Lixian, who wasn't very reliable. I'll ask. But my intuition tells me that she has no chance with Zianying. When her hair was almost dry, Su Qingseng turned to look at Hu Jinyao. Jinyao, I forgot to tell you something. What? It was rare for Hu Jinyao to see her so serious. Don't tell me you also have someone you like outside? Su Qingseng glared at him and ignored his joke. The hot spring club that you asked me to go to. Are you familiar with the boss inside? Not really. Hu Jinyao was telling the truth. He worked with Tianyu Group once before. But it would only happen once. Later, I heard that his background wasn't very clean, so we didn't work together anymore. As the president of Tianyu Group, Hu Jinyao was quite picky about his collaborators. It was said that the owner of the club was quite powerful. But that background was probably a little shady. Usually, the two families minded their own business. Later, he spent a lot of money to build his hot spring club. Naturally, he invited Hu Jinyao. For the sake of their previous cooperation, Hu Jinyao went there once. The other party was also very happy and gave him a gold card. There were too many such favors, so when he came back, he just casually left it there. If it weren't for the fact that Shi Mingwan had come to visit Su Qingseng this time, Su Qingseng wouldn't have let her go. He would never have thought that there was such a place to go. So you're not familiar with him? Yes, I'm not familiar with him. Hu Yangyuan, Hu Jinyao's great-uncle, was an official. He could be called a high-ranking official. Hu Jinyao's great-uncle was also a military commander. The Hu family was very cautious. They would never let themselves make mistakes. They would not let others gossip about them. Since they knew that the other party's background was a little awkward, they naturally wouldn't rush to make friends with him. But the Hu family wouldn't be afraid of them. What's wrong? Didn't you have fun there? It's not that I wasn't happy. Su Qingseng blinked and told him about her encounter with Zhang Yichen. After all, it was a big deal in the club. If the owner of the club told Hu Jinyao about it in the future, she wanted him to know. She was also worried that if the owner of the club was really a shady person, Hu Jinyao wouldn't be able to guard against him. Is that so? Zhang Yichen wouldn't easily appear in that kind of place. Hu Jinyao's mind was working fast. He thought of some rumors he had heard before. Let's not go to that place next time. Of course we won't go there again. Since Hu Jinyao said so, Su Qingseng wasn't stupid. She wouldn't go there again. I just wanted to tell you. I didn't offend anyone openly. But at that time, I still used your power to suppress them. I'm afraid that they will cause you trouble later. Hu Jinyao put his arms around her waist. He enjoyed the care and worry in her eyes. Honey, why do you care about me so much? Su Qingseng blushed a little. He was her husband. If she didn't care about him, who would she care about? Honey, why do you care about me so much? Hu Jinyao suddenly became serious again. He put his face close to Su Qingseng's. Honey, I'm so touched. Su Qingseng couldn't stand it anymore. She took a step back to avoid his face. His hands were still on her waist. She couldn't move away at all. She put her hands on his chest and said uncomfortably, "Anyway, I mean you should be careful." She didn't want to cause trouble for Hu Jinniao, but if trouble really came, she could only brace herself and face it. After all, in that situation, I had no choice but to use your identity to suppress them. Fortunately, it was fine. But then where did your uncle go? What did he do? I don't know. Anyway, when we got changed and came out, he was gone. Thinking of the mustached man's face the next morning, he should have passed, right? Don't worry, honey. They won't be so stupid to provoke me. It would be fine if they didn't provoke him, but if they really did provoke him, even if that person had a powerful background, so what? He wasn't afraid. Next time something like this happens, just use my identity. Hu Jinniao looked at Su Qingsang with an indulgent expression on his face. Don't be polite to those people. Just tell them who you are. If there were still people who were stupid enough to make Su Qingsang unhappy, then he wouldn't be polite. Su Qingsang was a little touched when she heard that. The feeling of having someone behind her was really good, but after thinking about it, she reached out and gently poked Hu Jinniao's chest. Do you think I cause trouble outside every day? This time, it was purely an accident. If it weren't for my uncle suddenly rushing in, I would still be in the hot spring. Thinking of Zhang Yichen, Su Qingsang remembered how she was almost disheveled when he broke in. Chapter 506. She didn't want Hu Jinniao to continue the topic, so she thought of something else. Speaking of which, your uncle's family isn't bad. Why did he have to do these dangerous things? If he didn't do these dangerous things, how could he have been promoted to senior colonel in such a short time? Hu Jinniao admired Zhang Yichen very much. They had a good relationship, so he understood Zhang Yichen's choice. His uncle was already a commander. If Zhang Yichen had been relying on his father's influence, it wouldn't have been a problem. However, Zhang Yichen was obviously ambitious, so he had to work harder than others, so that people wouldn't think that he got to where he was because of his connections. All right. What do you mean by uncle? Isn't my uncle your uncle? Su Qingsang stuck out her tongue. She couldn't tell him that Zhang Yichen looked too young. She wouldn't even think of the fact that he was one generation younger than her. Hu Jinniao suddenly narrowed his eyes, turned her body around, and moved closer to her face. You just said that my uncle saw you in the hot spring. Since she was in the hot spring, she wasn't wearing any clothes, was she? Hu Jinniao's face was so close that the tip of his nose almost touched hers. Su Qingsang blinked and looked into Hu Jinniao's deep eyes. That was an accident. Accident? Hu Jinniao put his hand on her shoulder and asked, Did he see you naked? His voice was not only obviously jealous, but Su Qingsang could also hear the danger in it. Looking at his enlarged face, she shook her head instinctively and said, No, I was wearing a swimsuit. Swimsuit? Which one? One-piece style? Or three-point style? Hu Jinniao said the last few words in a very low voice. His breath was warm, with a cool mint smell. Su Qingsang blushed slowly and said, Three-point style. Hu Jinniao narrowed his eyes and stared at Su Qingsang's face. He suddenly pulled her up and led her to the walk-in closet. Then he leaned against the door and looked at her. Su Qingsang didn't understand what he meant. She blinked and stood there without moving. Hurry up. His gaze was fervent, and there was a hint of impatience in his eyes. What? Find your swimsuit and put it on. She didn't know, but Hu Jinniao didn't mind reminding her. Speaking of which, I've never seen you wear a bikini. Previously, when she went to Japan to soak in the hot springs, he said he wanted to go with her. Later, he had something to do and couldn't make it. This time, she brought Shi Mingwan to the hot spring club. He thought that it would be inconvenient for him to follow them since they were both women, so he didn't go. Speaking of which, he had never seen Su Qingsang in a swimsuit. Hu Jinniao. Su Qingsang didn't want to talk to this guy. She walked past him and was about to walk out when Hu Jinniao put his arm around her waist. With a twist, he easily fixed her body on the closet door of the cloakroom. Find it yourself and change it, or I'll help you. Choose one. I won't choose either. Su Qingsang shook her head. Even though she was blushing all the way to her neck, She didn't intend to compromise just like that. I'm sleepy. I'm going to bed. It's not like you're going swimming, so why are you wearing a swimsuit for him to see? He was going crazy, and she wasn't going to go crazy with him. Hua Jingyao nodded. It seems that you're more inclined to let me do it. As he spoke, he held her waist tightly, not giving her a chance to run out. He rummaged through her wardrobe. She had brought some luggage to Rong City, but not much. All the clothes in this closet were bought by him later. Naturally, there were swimsuits among them. After all, the Hua family had a swimming pool. Hua Jingyao casually rummaged through and found several sets. There were all kinds of colors and styles. I'll take this one. Taking out a pink swimsuit, Hua Jingyao glanced at Su Qingsong's body up and down. Come on, put it on. Hua Jingyao, that's enough. She wasn't going to the swimming pool now, so why would she wear a swimsuit? Well, since you don't want to, then I have to do it myself. Hua Jingyao wasn't joking with her. He was serious. How could Su Qingsong let him do it? She took a big step back. No, I'll do it myself. Hua Jingyao gestured for her to do it. With a smile on his face, he looked at Su Qingsong with eager eyes. Su Qingsong felt uncomfortable under his gaze, and her eyes fell on the cloth in his hand. She gritted her teeth and finally took it. She was wearing pajamas, so she had to take them off to change into the swimsuit. She had undressed in front of Hua Jingyao before, but most of the time, he was the one doing it. Speaking of which, it was almost the first time that she took the initiative to do it in front of him. Thinking of this, Su Qingsong became more and more uncomfortable, and even felt a little weak in her legs. Hua Jinyao's eyes were still staring at her, and there seemed to be a faint spark in his eyes. When she took off her pajamas, the spark in his eyes turned into flames. Su Qingsong felt a little thirsty. She let the pajamas slide to the ground, and finally put on the small piece of cloth with trembling hands. Her movements weren't fast, but being stared at by him, even if he was her husband, and they had been intimate so many times, still made her feel embarrassed. Hua Jingyao watched Su Qingsong put on the bikini, and the flames in his eyes turned into flames. Su Qingsong tied the strap behind her, only to find that Hua Jingyao had been staring at her. She suddenly had a feeling that she didn't know where to put her hands and feet. She couldn't help but take a step back, and her body hit the door of the wardrobe behind her. Hua Jingyao took a step forward and stood still. He stared at her face, and his eyes were burning. I've already put it on for you to see. Su Qingsong's voice was a little hoarse. She blinked and wanted to move aside. Excuse me, I'm going to sleep. Hua Jingyao was like a big bad wolf staring at a little white rabbit, and his eyes were almost glowing red. How could he let her go like this? Honey. He put one hand on the side of her neck, and his tall body made it impossible for her to hide. Did you want Zhang Yichen to see you like this today? Why did he beat Zhang Yichen up? Shouldn't he hide somewhere? Hide in the hot spring where Su Qingsong was? He really deserved a beating. I told you it was an accident. It was an accident, but when he thought of Zhang Yichen looking at Su Qingsong's seductive face, he felt a little uncomfortable. Of course, he trusted Zhang Yichen's character. He came from the army, and he was a man of integrity. He had heard from his great-aunt that a new female soldier, who had just joined the army, had a crush on Zhang Yichen. The sky was swaying in front of Zhang Yichen. However, Zhang Yichen didn't move. Later, that female soldier somehow got the courage to walk up to Zhang Yichen and take off her clothes, trying to make it a reality. However, Zhang Yichen ignored the female soldier's attempt to throw herself into his arms, and directly threw her out of the room. Of course, when he threw her out, he still cared about her face and threw her clothes out. Although the female soldier hurriedly put on her clothes, she still couldn't suppress the matter. Later, that female soldier was transferred away. Maybe she was directly discharged from the army. Zhang Yichen had been in this kind of situation many times. In addition, in the past few years, he seemed to be focused on building his career, and he didn't care much about women. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in his 30s without a girlfriend, and didn't want to get married. As Hua Jingyao was thinking about this, his eyes fell on Su Qingsong's chest. He suddenly felt his throat tighten. How could those mediocre women be compared to Su Qingsong? Su Qingsong was Su Qingsong, and those people were those people. Lowering his head, he bit down on her lips, neither too lightly nor too heavily. Su Qingsang felt the pain and let out a moan. To Hu Jinniao, this moan was like pouring oil on the fire in his eyes. Right on the wardrobe door, he pressed her body down and kissed her hard. Su Qingsang's back was against the wardrobe door, and she only felt cold. She was afraid of the cold, so she held Hu Jinniao with both hands and tried to move forward a little. Hu Jinniao narrowed his eyes and picked her up. She looked like she was throwing herself into his arms. The moment her body was in the air, Su Qingsang was so scared that she held Hu Jinniao's neck tightly. Hu Jinniao stared at her snow-white breasts in front of him, and his eyes darkened. Against her neck he said in a nasal voice, "Wife, you are mine." Her body, and everything about her belonged to him. He didn't want any other man to touch her. Even if that man was his uncle, it was the same. Hu Jinniao looked at Yang Wenchang in front of him and narrowed his eyes. "What did you say?" He Xianyao, the daughter of the He family, came to the company yesterday. Who agreed? It wasn't me. Yang Wenchang was afraid that Hu Jinniao would think of him. The chairman arranged it. My father. Yes. Yang Wenchang looked at Hu Jinniao's face and said carefully, she was arranged to replace Zhang Yang, but I didn't agree. Later, she said she would go to the marketing department. We let her go. She said she would go to the marketing department. And you let her go? Hu Jinniao raised his eyebrows, his eyes sharp. Yang Wenchang lowered his head again, and his eyes were full of guilt. Well, the chairman. Hu Jinniao didn't say anything. This was not Hu Mingguang's idea, but Lu Tongjia's. It's okay. She wants to stay in the marketing department, right? It's okay. Starting tomorrow, let her work with old Zhang in the marketing department. Whatever old Zhang does, we'll do it together with her. Yang Wenchang's eyes lit up. His boss had made a smart move. President Hua, why didn't I think of this before? Do you think that the one who came is an ancestor and we have to worship her? Hu Jinniao and Yang Wenchang had worked together for many years and had a tacit understanding. However, Yang Wenchang had to listen to Hu Mingguang sometimes. After all, Hu Mingguang was the chairman. Hu Jinniao understood Yang Wenchang's position, but he wouldn't let it go. Chapter 507. Hu Jinniao's voice sounded deliberate. He had already decided to forget about He Xianyao setting him up. Since she was so blind and wanted to come looking for trouble, Lin Fan thought to himself. She shouldn't blame him for making her unhappy. Yes. Yang Wenchang nodded. He looked like he was watching a good show. Originally, he wanted to leave, but he suddenly thought of something else. President Hua, there's something I think I should tell you. About the Ike's case. Yes, the case has been going well, but there seems to be a problem with the signing. The signing has been delayed for a few days. Normally, the contract should have been signed by now. With Hu Yifan's ability, it shouldn't have been delayed for so long. Yang Wenchang began to feel that something was wrong. What's the problem? Hu Jinniao looked at Yang Wenchang. Before he could ask him to clarify the problem, Yang Wenchang's phone rang. He glanced at Hu Jinniao. It's Micah, the representative from Ike's. Meeting Hu Jinniao's eyes, he quickly picked up the phone. He looked at Hu Jinniao and spoke to the other party in English while putting the phone on speaker. Hu Jinniao could hear the voice on the other end of the phone clearly. Micah wanted to meet him? Yang Wenchang signaled with his eyes whether he could agree or not. Hu Jinniao shook his head. Yang Wenchang understood immediately. He told the other party that Hu Jinniao wouldn't be free for the next 2 days. As for when they could meet, it would depend on when Hu Jinniao was free. After hanging up, Yang Wenchang looked confused. President Hua, what do you think is going on with Hu Yifan? He had worked for Hu Jinniao for many years. Naturally, he knew that Hu Yifan didn't get along with Hu Jinniao. As for why he didn't want to replace him, it was because he didn't want Hu Jinniao to be the president. Don't worry about him. If Micah wants to meet me again, say yes. Okay. Yang Wenchang understood. What about Hu Yifan? Ignore him. As long as Micah made a move, Hu Yifan wouldn't be able to sit still. Yang Wenchang would know what Micah wanted. Yes. Yang Wenchang picked up the documents and was about to leave when he remembered one last thing. By the way, President Hua, the temporary replacement for Zhang Yang, has passed the interview. Her name is Ding Qing, and she's a top student at T University. She started working today. You deal with these matters. There's no need to tell me. Yang Wenchang responded and left. Hua Jingyao was lost in thought. Based on Hu Yifan's cunning, even if he couldn't get Ike's deal in the shortest time possible, he wouldn't have dragged it on for so long. More importantly, there was no way Ix would come back to him. After all, if he couldn't complete this project well, his position in the Tianyu group would be awkward in the end. Even Hua Mingguang couldn't say anything. Was Hu Yifan really that stupid? Or did he have other tricks up his sleeve? No matter which one it was, he wasn't afraid. He would just deal with it as it came. There was another knock on the door. Hua Jingyao looked unhappy. The person who came was Su Qingsang. This was her first time visiting the Tianyu group in Rong City. If she hadn't met Yang Wenchang just now, she wouldn't have been able to come up. After all, she was the wife of the president of the Tianyu group. Many people had only heard of her, but never met her. Why are you here? Seeing Su Qingsang, Hua Jingyao stood up to greet her. Meng Wan and I happened to be shopping nearby, so I thought I'd come to see you. What? So you came to see me on the way? Hua Jingyao raised his hand to cover his chest, looking hurt. Honey, I'm hurt. Seeing him like this, Su Qingsang wanted to laugh. She raised the small box in her hand and said, Since you're hurt, I guess you can't have dessert, right? Can I give it to someone else? No. His wife bought it for him. Even if he didn't like sweets, he couldn't let it fall into someone else's hands. Hua Jingyao took the box from her hand and put it on the coffee table. He put it on the coffee table and said, Hey, didn't you say you came with Shi Mengwan? Where is she? She went to the bathroom. She had never been to Hua Jingyao's workplace, so she brought Shi Mengwan here. Good timing. Let's have dinner together tonight. Hua Jingyao received a call from one Xianying today. Xianying said he wants to treat you to dinner. Treating me is fake. It's Mengwan, right? Su Qingsang blinked. Did he think she didn't know what one Xianying was thinking? Then will you do me the honor? I will, but it's really impossible for him and Mengwan to be together. Su Qingsang had already asked Shi Mengwan today, and she didn't mean that. Besides, she's leaving tomorrow. Leaving tomorrow? Why don't you stay for a few more days? I have to work, and I can't be with her every day. She also has things to do in Lin City. So she and Xianying are destined not to be together. As Su Qingsang spoke, her phone rang. Shi Mengwan was already ready and waiting for her downstairs. I'll leave first. Let's talk about dinner later. Since it was impossible for them to be together, it was better not to give him hope. When Su Qingsang left, she pointed at the snacks on the coffee table and blew a kiss at Hua Jingyao. Seeing his eyes suddenly become deep, she immediately became timid and quickly walked out. Su Qingsang walked out of the office. Before she reached the elevator, she saw a beautiful woman walking toward her. She was a real beauty. She was about 170 centimeters tall, had a slim figure, a voluptuous body, beautiful facial features, and exquisite makeup. She was wearing a pair of Gucci high heels and a Chanel business suit. She didn't have a special concept of brands. However, she happened to see the woman in front of her in a magazine when she went to the spa a few days ago. Su Qingsang blinked. There was such a beauty in Hua Jingyao's office. How good were the benefits of Tianyu Group? The woman was holding a stack of documents in her hand. She looked like a standard elite office woman. She was looking at the woman, and the woman was looking at her. Su Qingsang wanted to go out with Shi Mengwan. She came out in sportswear. She looked casual and casual. Although Su Qingsang didn't feel that she was inferior to the woman in front of her, she felt that she lacked a sense of formality and solemnity. Su Qingsang also felt strange when she realized her own mentality. What was even stranger was that Su Qingsang didn't know if it was an illusion, but she seemed to see a flash of contempt in the woman's eyes. She wanted to see it clearly, but the woman curled the corners of her lips and smiled at her. She didn't speak, but took the stack of documents, walked past her, and walked toward Hua Jingyao's office. Chapter 508. Su Qingsang suddenly turned to look at her. She still had a faint smile on her lips. Before Su Qingseng could say anything, she waved the folder in her hand and went straight into Hu Jinyao's office. Before entering the door, the moment she pushed it open, she turned to look at Su Qingseng. When their eyes met, she silently said 4 words. "Open the door and close it." Just like that, the graceful figure disappeared behind the door. Su Qingseng's expression became a little strange. It was her first time in Hu Jinyao's office. When Yang Wenchang took her upstairs just now, they took the elevator for the president. She didn't meet anyone, so how did this woman know her identity? "Qingseng? What's wrong?" Shi Mengwan's words brought her back to reality. Only then did she realize that she had already left the building of Tianyu Group and had already reached the parking lot. "Nothing." Su Qingseng shook her head. Thinking of the last few words that her daughter had uttered, she suddenly felt a sense of provocation. Who was that woman? What did she mean by those words? "TSK, I know you and Hu Jinyao are very loving. You don't have to look like this when you leave him, do you? After all, you two are together every day now." Shi Mengwan was quite dissatisfied with her absent-mindedness. "I haven't even gone up and let you two be alone. Why are you still so reluctant to leave? I'm so jealous." "What are you talking about?" Su Qingseng was amused by her words. "It's not that I can't bear to leave him. I just remembered that Hu Jinyao doesn't seem to like desserts. In the end, I sent 2 boxes of desserts up." She had been shopping with Shi Mengwan and happened to walk near the dessert shop, so she bought desserts. Later, she remembered that she had gone out to eat with Hu Jinyao a few times, and she had never seen him eat desserts at the Hu family. "You're a little incompetent as a wife." Shi Mengwan's words were teasing. "You don't even know what your husband likes to eat." "Who said that?" "I know. I just forgot." Su Qingseng blushed a little. She had really forgotten about it because she was shopping. "I think you should be more careful in the future. Otherwise, your husband is so handsome and has such a high status. If a girl comes and snatches him away one day, you won't even have a place to cry. Screw you. My Jinyao wouldn't do that." Su Qingseng was sure, but she couldn't help but think of the woman she had just seen upstairs. Somehow, she felt a little uncomfortable in her heart. "My Jinyao. TSK, your words are so sour." Shi Mengwan's voice brought her back to her senses. She shook off that thought. She believed in Hu Jinyao's character. He would never betray his love and marriage. Inexplicably, this was what she believed. With such confidence, she didn't ask Hu Jinyao who the woman was that night. There was no need to ask, and there was no need to know. Since she chose to trust him, there was no need for her to ask anything else. Because Shi Mengwan was about to leave, she slept with Shi Mengwan that night. As for Hu Jinyao's dark expression, she instinctively ignored it. The next day, Su Qingseng sent Shi Mengwan off, returned to the hospital, and continued to do what she was supposed to do. The courtyard became busy. For a few days, it was as if a wave of people were rushing to give birth. Every day, they had to receive a large number of pregnant women. The ward was almost full. Not only were they busy, but there were also a few pregnant women who weren't in good condition. So they had to pay attention to them from time to time. Not to mention her. Even Zheng Qinyu was very busy. Some pregnant women were picky and said that they didn't want male doctors. But when there were no doctors, male doctors were also useful. Under such circumstances, when the next weekend came, Su Qingseng naturally didn't go back to the Hu family. She could only call old Master Hua and tell him that she had to be on duty this weekend, so she might not be able to see him. Old Master Hua was very understanding about his granddaughter-in-law's work. He didn't say much, but just told her to work hard. Hu Jinyao looked at Micah, who was sitting in front of him. Next to him was his secretary Vera. This time, Hu Jinyao brought Yang Wenchang with him. They had been sitting for 20 minutes. Micah didn't open the door, but Hu Jinyao was calm. He was leisurely drinking the tea in front of him. "The tea is good." Hu Jinyao glanced at Yang Wenchang, who was sitting next to him, with appreciation. "Try it." His attitude was a little frivolous. Micah was angry, but he didn't show it on his face. "President Hua, you still have the leisure to drink tea? I thought you wouldn't even be able to eat now." "Why would I?" Hu Jinyao smiled. Why would I not be able to eat? President Hua. Micah thought that Hu Jingyao was pretending. In his opinion, how could Hu Jingyao not care about it at all? That was impossible. You were the one who talked to me about the cooperation between our two companies. Why is it Mr. Hu Yifan now? No matter who I talk to, the final result is the cooperation with Tianyu Group. I don't see the difference. Of course there is a difference. Micah looked at Hu Jingyao, as if feeling sorry for him. President Hua, we had a good talk before. I thought you were willing to cooperate with me. Yes. Tianyu Group is willing to cooperate with Ike's at any time. Hu Jingyao was talking about the two companies, but Micah was talking about the two of them. Micah wasn't stupid. Of course he understood. President Hua, I don't think you are willing to give such a big piece of the cake to your brother. You said it yourself, he is my brother. If that's the case, why do we have to be separate? But Tianyu Group should be yours. Micah looked sad. Isn't it? Mr. Micah, please be careful. Tianyu Group belongs to the Hua family. But without your father, the Hua family wouldn't be where it is now. Hu Jingyao didn't deny this. Why could Hua Mingguang become the chairman, while Hua Mingliang could only be a director, which was an idle job? When Tianyu Group was first established, it couldn't be on such a scale. Although Old Master Hua was ruthless, he only made Tianyu Group the largest in Rong City. After Hua Mingguang took over, he expanded the business to other cities in the country. He also laid the foundation for Tianyu Group to become a multinational company. After that, Hu Jingyao took over. After he took over, he made a series of measures to make Tianyu Group stronger. Hu Jingyao understood what Micah meant. Seriously speaking, he and Hua Mingguang should be the only ones in Tianyu Group. Of course it was the same now. However, after Hu Yifan graduated from school and entered Tianyu Group, he started to have more thoughts with Hua Yang and Hu Yifan. They did a lot of small things, but Hua Mingguang tolerated them all. Because of this, Hu Jingyao had a lot of troubles. Mr. Micah, what are you trying to say? Just say it. If you want to sow discord between me and my brother, you don't have to. In some ways I trust him. Even if he didn't trust him, it was the Hua family's business. He wouldn't show it in front of Micah, a collaborator or a foreigner. Mr. Hua, I can't be compared to you. Micah sighed. He seemed to be helpless about Hu Jingyao's words. Mr. Hua, I sincerely want to cooperate with you, but I know some small things. I think Mr. Hua will be very interested in them. Micah didn't beat around the bush. He got to the point. Hu Jingyao looked at him. Because of what Micah said next, his expression finally changed. It was rare that Su Qingsang didn't have to be on duty or stay in the hospital. She bought some bird food to feed the parrot, then bought 2 boxes of tea to visit Old Master Hua. She had heard from Hu Jingyao that Old Master Hua loved tea. The Hua family must have good tea. They had a lot of special tea, but the tea she gave him would be different. It was an apology for not having time to visit Old Master Hua. Old Master Hua was really nice to her and trusted her. Su Qingsang was very grateful. If she could, she would like to spend more time with Old Master Hua. However, when Su Qingsang arrived at the Hua family's house, she found that Old Master Hua had gone out to see an old friend. He would come back later. As for how late, Uncle Cheng didn't know if he would come back for dinner. Su Qingsang finally decided to visit the parrot before going home. Old Master Hua wasn't there, so Su Qingsang couldn't stay. The main thing was that if she ran into Lu Tongjia later, they wouldn't quarrel, but they never had a good conversation when they met. Therefore, she didn't want to be impulsive. Su Qingsang stood under the eaves in the backyard. Rong City was getting warmer. The temperature wasn't high, but at least it wasn't as cold as before. The parrot seemed to be very happy to see her and kept squawking. But even if it was happy, the parrot had to express its dissatisfaction. Bastard, don't look at me. Bastard, ignore me. Su Qingsang was so angry that she wanted to laugh. It was the bird who had been cold and ignored her no matter how she called. Why was she ignoring it now? What was even funnier was that it was complaining, but it still scolded her. I think you shouldn't be called jadeite. Change it to rascal. You like scolding people so much. Rascal, you rascal. Rascal. You rascal. The parrot scolded her again. Su Qingsang really laughed. Why was the bird getting addicted to scolding her? Su Qingsang rarely got playful. She glared at the bird in front of her fiercely. You're having fun, aren't you? Believe it or not, I'll pluck all your feathers, kill you and eat you. Bad guy, bad guy. The parrot squawked even louder. Boss. Help. Bad guy. He wants to eat me. Boss, help. Help. Ha 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 ha. Su Qingsang couldn't help but laugh out loud. She was overjoyed. The bird was so funny. She didn't laugh for long before she heard low laughter behind her. Chapter 509. Uncle. Su Qingsang blinked and looked at the person in front of her. She found that she had been seeing Zhang Yichen more often recently, but it didn't seem to be a coincidence. After all, the Hua family was Zhang Yichen's uncle's home. He could come and go as he pleased without any scruples. Zhang Yichen looked at Su Qingsang and responded to the word uncle in a very casual tone. He seemed to be smiling just now. The corners of his mouth were still curled up, with a faint shallow smile. Su Qingsang wasn't sure how much of her conversation with the parrot he had heard. Somehow, she felt a little embarrassed. It seemed that whenever she appeared in front of him, she wouldn't look good. Uncle, are you here for Grandpa? Grandpa went out. He's not home. I know. Zhang Yichen was here for old Master Hua. He didn't know until later that Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao only came to the Hua family's house on weekends. He wanted to avoid Su Qingsang when she came. Unexpectedly, he didn't manage to avoid her. He didn't expect Su Qingsang to be at home. Not only was she at home, but she was also playing with the parrot in the backyard. When she smiled, there was a hint of innocence and frankness in it. She didn't have the arrogance that other girls in Rong City had. She looked as cute as a girl next door. But he knew that was only one side of her. She had many other sides. She was cunning when she was trying to blackmail the family members. And she was serious when she was stitching up people's wounds. And she was arrogant and aggressive when she was facing that man's subordinates. The last thing that flashed through his mind was Su Qingsang's smooth shoulders that were half exposed when she was soaking in the hot spring, and her jade-like skin. Realizing what he was thinking, he put on a serious expression, and the smile on his face faded a little. He looked so serious that Su Qingsang thought he didn't want to see her. Well, she was the one who saw him hiding in the closet in a sorry state. Then, Uncle, please help yourself. I'm leaving. She was about to walk into the house when Zhang Yichen suddenly stopped her when she was about to walk past him. Don't move. Su Qingsang was startled and subconsciously glanced at him. Zhang Yichen realized that his tone was too stiff. He lowered his voice uncomfortably and said, There's something dirty. Where? Don't move. Zhang Yichen raised his hand and gently plucked a feather out of her hair. She looked at him with hidden eagerness in her eyes. However, the corners of his lips were tightly pursed. That was the result of him trying his best to restrain himself. Su Qingsang didn't see the look on Zhang Yichen's face. When he brought the feather to her, she lowered her head and said, Thank you. The corners of Zhang Yichen's mouth were cold and stiff. Even his voice was lower. No need. Su Qingsang didn't stay long because of his cold attitude. She left as fast as she could. Zhang Yichen stood there without moving. After Su Qingsang left, the expression on his face relaxed a little. He closed his eyes and sniffed. There was still the faint fragrance of Su Qingsang in the air. Zhang Yichen abruptly opened his eyes and looked at a spot in the garden. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he keenly sensed that someone was spying on him just now. The feeling of being watched was very obvious. If he hadn't been distracted just now, he would have realized it. Zhang Yichen's expression was serious. He stared in that direction for a long time, but the feeling disappeared. His face darkened slightly. He suddenly realized that he had been too careless. He should have been more careful not to let anyone see anything. After all, he could restrain that little bit of lustful thoughts. But was it really just a little bit? They had only met a few times, and they had only interacted for a short time. But he couldn't help but think about it. If only she wasn't Hua Jinyao's wife. If only she hadn't gotten married so early. He even thought that if the person she married was him, would she also show such a gentle smile in front of him, with a tinge of shyness? Closing his eyes, Zhang Yichen suppressed this crazy thought in time. He clenched his fists so tightly that the veins on the back of his hands were bulging. He couldn't think about it anymore. If someone found out about it, it wouldn't end well for him and Su Qingsang. Zhang Yichen glanced at the place again, thinking about the possibility of who was there. Finally he turned and left. When Su Qingsang got home, she found that Hu Jinyao had come home earlier than her. She was a little surprised. Ms. Yu was cooking in the kitchen, while Hu Jinyao was sitting on a chair on the balcony. It was so cold outside, but he didn't come in. He didn't notice that she was back. Su Qingsang frowned, put down the things, changed her shoes and walked out. Jinyao. Hu Jinyao turned around and smiled when he saw Su Qingsang. You're back. Su Qingsang blinked and looked at him. The lights on the balcony were off. She seemed to have seen a flash of gloominess in Hu Jinyao's eyes. But now, he was only looking at her with a faint smile, as if that emotion just now was her illusion. Are you okay? I'm fine. Why did you come out here to stand in the cold wind alone? The heating in Rome City hadn't been turned off yet, so it was very cold outside. She felt cold even standing there, not to mention how long he had been standing in the cold wind. Su Qingsang suddenly reached out and held his hand. She found that his hand was not as warm as it used to be. Instead, it was ice cold. Su Qingsang glared at him. Hu Jinyao, you call this okay? The concern in her eyes was real. Hu Jinyao looked at her and suddenly reached out to pull her into his arms. Su Qingsang was stunned for a second, then hugged him with both hands around his waist. His clothes were cold from the wind. She leaned her face against it, feeling a little uncomfortable from the coldness. Hu Jinyao. She didn't look up, but slightly tightened her arms. I'm your wife. You can tell me if you need anything. Yes, maybe I can't help you with your business. I can't even help you with other things. But at least I can listen. Su Qingsang's voice was very soft, but it sounded in the dark night. Hu Jinyao was still silent. He couldn't say it. He looked at Su Qingsang and thought about what Micah said in the afternoon. He couldn't say it. He couldn't tell Su Qingsang that his mother, his father, his cousin and his uncle, almost everyone didn't want him to live well. Hu Jinyao closed his eyes and rested his chin on the top of Su Qingsang's head. There was a light fragrance in her hair, and he felt that the smell was very comfortable. Her body was very soft. Compared to his figure, it was delicate and soft. Hugging her in his arms, it made his heart soften. Chapter 5:10. Su Qingsang looked up at him with her clear eyes. If there was moonlight, he could see his shadow in her eyes. But even without moonlight, Hu Jinyao knew that her eyes were full of him. His heart moved slightly, but he didn't respond to her words. Hu Jinyao, if you don't want to tell me, I won't ask. But I hope you understand. We are husband and wife. Since we are husband and wife, we are one. You can try talking to me too. He tried to trust her and tell her about his troubles. She might not be able to help, but at least there was someone to share his worries with and listen to him. Hu Jinyao's response was to reach out and hug her tightly. Ms. Yu's voice came from inside. Dinner was ready. Su Qingsang patted Hu Jinyao's back and said, Let's go. Let's go eat. Hu Jinyao let go of her and looked at Su Qingsang's beautiful face. He lowered his head and planted a light kiss on her forehead. Don't worry. I'm fine. Su Qingsang didn't believe him, but since he said so, she could only believe him. She felt a little disappointed in her heart that she didn't even know about. She was almost a blank piece of paper in front of him. Whether it was her family background or her thoughts, everything was under his control. He knew everything clearly, but she felt that he still had secrets, things that he didn't want to share with her. That didn't feel good. She thought that maybe he really didn't want to tell her because of work, or maybe because she wouldn't understand even if he told her. That little bit of discomfort was suppressed in a corner of her heart and became a small seed. Hu Jinyao looked at the documents handed to him by the person in front of him and glanced at her. Ding Qing, the new female secretary, was here to replace Zhang Yang. She graduated from MIT, had a good education background, and had a very good resume. Such a talent came to Tianyu Group as a secretary. It didn't mean that Tianyu Group's secretaries were bad. It was because with Ding Qing's resume, she could get a better position. However, Hua Jinyao later watched the video of her interview and the reason why she came to apply for the job. According to her, her mother had been in poor health recently, so she wanted to come back and spend more time with her. Another reason was that Hua Jinyao had worked with the company she used to work for. She liked the way Hua Jinyao's company did things, and she hoped to learn new things from Tianyu Group. She had been in the company for more than a week, and her performance was indeed quite outstanding. Not only was she able to do the things that Yang Wenchang arranged for her, but there were also some things that she could do well even without his arrangement. Usually, Hua Jinyao didn't use female secretaries. However, Ding Qing was indeed very capable. Therefore, 1 week was enough for him to change his mind about replacing her. Ding Qing stood there, looking a little nervous. He looked at Hua Jinyao with uncertainty in his eyes. "President Hua, are the documents all right?" "No." Hua Jinyao withdrew his gaze, signed the document, and handed it to her. "Zhang Yang will go on vacation in 2 days. Tell him to hand over the rest of the work to you." "Yes. I know. Zhang Yang has told me what to do." Ding Qing smiled and held the document in her hands in front of her chest. It seemed that the document was a little lower than her chest. Because of that, the 2 lumps in her chest seemed to be completely squeezed together. Hua Jinyao didn't see that, but Ding Qing looked at Hua Jinyao's eyes with concern. "President Hua, you don't look so good. Did you not sleep well yesterday? Do you want me to make you a cup of coffee?" "Sure." Hua Jinyao did not sleep well yesterday. He didn't know if it was because of what Micah said, but he had been having nightmares these days. He rubbed between his eyebrows and signaled Ding Qing to leave. A few minutes after Ding Qing left, she came back with a cup of coffee in her hand. There was a small piece of cake on top of it. "President Hua, I don't think it's good to drink coffee on an empty stomach. Have a piece of cake." Hua Jinyao glanced at Ding Qing. Her eyes were very calm. "President Hua, take care of yourself. I'm still waiting to learn from you." Hua Jinyao looked at her calmness and didn't think much of it. "Thank you, but I don't like cake." "Oh really?" Ding Qing seemed to be very upset. "I saw a box of desserts in your office last time. My wife bought it." What he meant was obvious. Since Su Qingsang bought it, even if she didn't like it, she had to eat it. And Ding Qing wasn't qualified. Ding Qing wasn't mad at all, even though it was a very direct sentence. Instead, she stuck out her tongue. "I'm sorry, President Hua. I didn't know. It's okay. You can take it out." Hua Jinyao lowered his head and focused on the document in front of him. Ding Qing picked up the piece of cake. The look on her face seemed to be still upset and blaming herself for her mistake. However, when she turned around, the regret in her eyes suddenly disappeared. Was he eating it because his wife bought it? She would like to see if Hua Jinyao would eat it when she brought it to his office again. Hua Jinyao came out of the shower with the towel on his head. He casually dried his hair with the towel, then sat in front of the dressing table, waiting for Su Qingsang to dry his hair for him. However, he was about to be disappointed. Su Qingsang was video chatting with Li Qianxue. After all this time, Li Qianxue's company had stabilized. She also found a professional manager to help her. Now that the company was stable, she looked much better. At the moment, she was talking to Su Qingsang about Old Master Li's birthday. Old Master Li's birthday was on the 3rd of next month. It was not many days away, although it wasn't a birthday celebration. Old Master Li had just reunited with his granddaughter, and he hoped that Su Qingsang could come home to celebrate his birthday. However, even if Old Master Li wanted to, he didn't want to add to Su Qingsang's troubles. So, he could only talk about it in front of Li Qianxue. Li Qianxue found it funny, but also sad. Her daughter had never been taken care of for even a day. When she reunited with her granddaughter, she was married to a place so far away. "I know you're busy with work, but your grandpa really wants you to come home. Qingsang, can you arrange it?" Li Qianxue was a little careful with her words. She was really afraid that Su Qingsang wouldn't be willing. Speaking of which, during this period of time, the relationship between mother and daughter had improved a lot. But she still often worried that her daughter would choose to resent her because of the previous 20 years of neglect. Even though she knew that Su Qingsang wasn't that kind of person, some thoughts couldn't be suppressed. Mom, what are you talking about? Of course I have to come back for Grandpa's birthday. In the past, when she wasn't the granddaughter of the Li family, she would appear on Old Master Li's birthday. Not to mention now that she was Old Master Li's biological granddaughter. Really? Okay, then I'll talk to your grandpa. The smile on Li Qinshua's face became a little more sincere. Su Qingsang also felt very happy. She actually missed Li Qinsua very much, although they could video chat every day and talk on the phone. But seeing her in person was still different from seeing her on video. Okay, you tell Grandpa that I will definitely come back. Then let Jinyao come back together. It was not right for her grandson-in-law to not be there. Okay, I'll tell him. Su Qingsang finished speaking, but there was one thing she didn't say. That was, what about Su Qinghui? Should he go back? However, looking at Li Qinshua's happy face, she didn't mention Su Qinghui in the end to make Li Qinsua unhappy. After ending the call, she saw Hu Jinyao sitting in the back. His hair was slightly wet, and his expression was a little sad. Hey, you took a shower? Then I'll go take a shower. Su Qingsang put down her phone and was about to get up, but Hu Jinyao grabbed her hand. Honey, help me dry my hair. Su Qingsang glanced at him, took the hairdryer from the side, and began to dry his hair for him. She also told him that she was going back to Lin City next month. Although it was next month, it was actually almost next week. It's Grandpa's birthday, so of course we have to go back. After Hu Jinyao finished speaking, as if he suddenly thought of something, he said, There are a lot of things to do in the company recently. I'll make some arrangements and go back with you when the time comes. Thank you. You're so nice. Su Qingsang was very happy. She was so happy that she bent down to kiss Hu Jinyao's face. For a moment, she forgot that she still had the hairdryer in her hand. Ugh! Hu Jinyao groaned in pain. Only then did she realize that she had hurt him. Are you okay? Let me see. Where are you hurt? Hu Jinyao put her on his lap and turned off the hairdryer. Seeing the worried look on her face, he leaned over and kissed her on the lips. You're sad. You were so happy when you talked about going back to Lin City. I'm hurt. I need you to comfort me. Su Qingsang looked at his playful face and said, How do you want me to comfort you? What do you think? Hu Jinyao put his arm around her waist, looked at her tender red lips, and kissed them hard. Every day after Hu Jinyao went into the company, Ding Qing was responsible for telling him about his schedule for the day. Today, Hu Jinyao didn't ask her to leave as he usually did. Book 2 tickets for me on the second flight to Lin City. In the past, Zhang Yang had been the one to do all these things. After saying that, he noticed that Ding Qing was standing still and looking up at him. What's wrong? Is there a problem? No problem. Ding Qing nodded. President Hua, are you going to Lin City with Assistant Yang on a business trip? No. I'm going to Lin City with my wife. Ding Qing's hand that was holding the pen slightly tightened, but she smiled and nodded. Okay. I'll go now. Hu Jinyao thought that Su Qingsang would want to see Li Qinsua as soon as possible, so he asked Ding Qing to book the tickets for the morning. He waved his hand and let her go. After Ding Qing went back to her office, she didn't hurry to book the tickets. Instead, she took out her phone and dialed a few numbers. President Hua is going to Lin City on the 2nd of next month. She told Ding Qing what she had heard. She didn't know what the other side of the phone said, but a bright smile appeared on her face. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.